Hereby call to order the Roseville Economic Development Authority meeting for Monday, July 20th, 2026. Mr. City Manager, would you call the roll, please?
Member Bauer?
Here.
Member Groff?
Here.
Member Strawn?
Here.
Member Schroeder? President Rowe?
Here. And Member Schroeder indicated that she would not be able to attend this evening. A couple of announcements for people in the audience. First of all, it doesn't sound like the PA is going out over the speakers. Hopefully we'll get that adjusted or people can hear us at some point.
They can.
Is it better now? I suppose I should talk so you can actually hear. All right. We're good? All right. Let me know in the future, through the course of the evening, if things change. Once again, this is the Economic Development Authority for the City of Roseville, the meeting for Monday, July 20th, 2026. All members are present except Member Schroeder, who indicated she would not be able to attend. And I was going to mention for folks participating here in the council chambers, we do have a copy of the agenda for anybody who wishes their own copy to follow along with the meeting. We do also have a copy of the agenda for our city council meeting, which immediately follows the EDA meeting. We also have a complete set of the meeting materials for both meetings in a 3-ring binder. All of these are available on the table in the back of the room under the big clock by the back door. Excuse me, we would ask folks if you have a cell phone to be sure and silence it, or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt our meeting this evening. And with that, we'll ask folks to stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on our EDA agenda this evening is to approve the agenda, and I'll just check with staff. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Mr. President, no changes to the EDA agenda.
All right. Are there any changes that members of the EDA wish to make to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Groff, seconded by Member Strawn. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously 4-0. We have our agenda for this evening. As is the norm with the Economic Development Authority meetings, we do not do the general public comment at the start of the meeting, but rather defer that to the start of the council meeting, which will follow, as I noted before, immediately after the Economic Development Authority meeting. So that will bring us right into our business items. And our first business item this evening for the authority is item 5A, which is to receive an update on the Emergency Rental Assistance Program with Neighborhood House. We have our Housing and Economic Development Program Manager here, Jeannie Kelsey, to bring this update to us, and we look forward to hearing.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you, President Rowe, board members. For your information, we adopted a program on April 13th of this year for the authorizing to enter into an agreement with Neighborhood House to administer an emergency rental assistance program. The program at that time was designed with the following guidelines, which is 50% or less area median income, evidence of past due rent, assistance available shall not exceed a maximum of 2 months' rent plus fees per household within the last 18 months. Distribution would be on a first-come, first-served basis. And then in addition to, we needed documentation of loss of income or no income or an attestment of that. At that point, we recommended a budget of $5,000 a month for a total of 2 years, which equated to $132,000, which included the 10% administration fee that we are paying Neighborhood House. To date, we have distributed a little over $24,000 in emergency rental assistance. That basically is equating to about 41% of our first year budget of the amount of the $66,000 that we have given to Neighborhood House so far. That amount did not include also the 10% administration, just so you know. That's calculated, though, with their draws. We've helped 8 households so far. And they've averaged about a little over $3,000 per our funds per each of those households. It has needed a total, though, if you can see, the crisis has been a little over $4,100 a month per or not month, but total for the people. It's really been a great partnership because we've been able to have Neighborhood House access other bundling of funds that they have access to, which has allowed us then to help families a little more and greater of the getting out of the difficulties that they're in. As you can see, our funds have been bundled to the point that we've extended anywhere from about 51% of our funds up to, some of these cases have been 100% of our funds to assist them with. We've helped an average of about household on average. So it's anywhere from a family of 1 to 4 people that have been assisted. And as you can see, the demographics have ranged from 62.5% identifying as Black, African American, or African, 12.5% as Asian or Asian American, and 25% have been white. Neighborhood House has been able to prioritize in getting the documentation and the assessments and funding coordination within an average of about 14 and a half days, which has allowed these people then to have further legal or financial education of escalations of their household. So it's been really great that we've been able to keep 8 people housed in Roseville versus being 8 families, you're right, housed in Roseville versus evicted. At this time, we're not recommending any changes to the program. We will continue to monitor the program and the use of the program. We did feel like that there was probably a pent-up demand, and so that's why there was such a demand of more than what we anticipated at the very beginning. So as the program continues, if we start finding that we need additional funding, we will bring it back to the board. But we, at this point, are recommending just stay the course and not make any changes. As you can see, there is basically just a report for your information, and we're just asking you to receive the report and ask any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kelsey. Appreciate the update and the encouraging information about the assistance to those 8 families in our community. Are there questions from members of the board for our staff in regard to the program or feedback, comments? Member Strawn.
I was just curious, were all of these renters?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I figured with eviction, but we didn't get a request for anyone usually it's a longer process and more months behind. If someone.
Right. This program is purely for rental at this point.
Perfect.
We did not do it for delayed mortgage payments at this point at all because that hasn't been identified as a need in the community yet.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Other questions, comments? Member Groff.
I really appreciate the working with other organizations because, of course, this maximizes our ability to help people in this struggle. And there are other organizations, and I know our CAT team knows those, and I'm sure you do too. So I think that was a good move. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? I did want to just ask too, as far as how those 8 families connected with the program. Was it largely through our means that we have through our social worker or housing navigator, or were there other means that people connected with the program that we can report on?
All of the above.
Okay, that's also good to hear because I think we were concerned how people would hear about and how people would connect with it, and I think that while 8 is a good number to help those families, and certainly that's a tremendous thing for those families. I certainly want to make sure that we're continuing to explore those ways to connect the program with people that are in need in the community, and so I'm sure that is part of the program and will be going forward. All right. I do want to provide an opportunity, too, if there's anyone from the public who wished to speak to this item, this would be an opportunity. If there is anyone from the public, we'll free up the one microphone at the table there, if you'd like. All right, does not appear to be the case. Thank you for the report, and we look forward to continued updates. All right, next on our agenda is to receive the recommendations from our strategic planning work group in relation to spending of the city's local affordable housing aid sales tax funds that we received from the state of Minnesota. And we have our community development director, Janice Gunlock, with us this evening to bring those recommendations for the board's consideration. Welcome.
Thank you, President Rowe, members of the board. This is information for you. There's no specific action we're looking for, but we have some notes at the end we can go through once we're there. just to kind of remind you of how we got here, because this is a somewhat long process. Back on February 9th, the City Council did receive an update on the strategic plan, and you may recall this really long sheet of a bunch of goals and objectives that were developed regarding all of the strategic priorities. And goal number 2 of that update related to the economic vitality strategic priority stated that housing types and programs are provided in a manner that contributes to the economic success for households at all income levels. And there are some success indicators related to that strategic priority goal and objective. Given the volume of goals and objectives behind those goals that you were presented with in February, we focused on what we termed year 1 focused objectives. And one of those action items for year 1 was the programming of local affordable housing aid. And so to build off the cross-department collaborative teams that we used to develop those goals and objectives related to the strategic plan, we developed a similar work group to explore LAHA programming. This work group included staff from the Departments of Administration, Public Works, Police, and Community Development, and we selected staff to participate in this work group who interact in some form or another with residents of our community who are experiencing housing challenges. So the work group met 4 times, and there was also some email dialogue between those meetings. We had to update the group on the background and purpose of local affordable housing aid. We then engaged in a brainstorming exercise to help understand what the realm of challenges are that the various staff are interacting with residents on. And then we lumped those ideas into several themes to try and narrow focus. And then we organized those themes based on order of priority. And so I attempted to summarize that all on one page. It's a part of your packet materials. So I'm not going to go into every single detail of all 5 of these, again, because it's really a high-level summary. But there were 5 sort of concepts that emerged from this work group. And these are listed in the order of priority that this group developed. So the first one was to fund a drop-in center for those experiencing housing instability. And so think of this as a partnership with a church or some other mission-oriented organization. There'd probably be a dedicated caseworker assigned to the space, and it would provide things like meals, laundry, showers, lockers, access to Wi-Fi and charging stations, maybe a place to receive mail, and then getting transportation taken care of, whether it's access to vouchers or other things. The second one was to provide support to seniors and persons with disabilities who are struggling to maintain their housing. So earlier on in the year, we had a pretty involved conversation about housing programs generally, but we did provide some concepts for LAHA as well. And this is something that was provided back then, and then this group sort of reaffirmed this need. And so you may recall we came up with a concept to partner with Help at My Door. They would basically organize and fund projects and/or services aimed at maintaining homeownership and independent living for those who are either disabled or just seniors. The third item was to rehabilitate, renovate, and replace manufactured homes. We have one manufactured home park in our city, and the goal would be to achieve life safety and energy efficiency in as many units as possible, acknowledging that it could also serve as placement of a new unit or replacement of a unit, because sometimes those are not salvageable. The fourth program is to fund emergency congregate living for elderly women and/or single-parent households. The thought here was a low-density housing type, maybe 4 to 6 beds. Again, partner with an organization who knows how to run these. And then the only people who could place persons in this living facility would be Roseville staff who are interacting. And then again, we'd partner with somebody who could do that. And then the last program idea was down payment assistance to secure rental housing. So we have a down payment assistance program right now for home ownership, but this would be a similar program for somebody who maybe has a job but is not able to come up with first, last month's rent and a security deposit. Sometimes that can be overwhelming and a burden to achieve housing. So those are the 5 program ideas. I'll go through the last couple of slides and then we can talk more specifically about them if you'd like. I want to remind the board and the members of the public about local affordable housing aid. This is sales tax proceeds that we get from the state. It happens every year, and I've outlined the amounts that we've received beginning in 2024. The state law outlines the deadline under which you have to commit those funds, as well as spending those funds. And if we don't spend them, we have to return them and thereby don't get to control how they are spent. The amount of money that we receive is a formula that is managed by the state, but essentially it's how much sales tax proceeds are they taking in, and then they disperse it on like a per capita basis on those households that are cost burdened. So the higher amount of cost burdened households we have, the more money we receive in local affordable housing aid, assuming the total amount of revenue they took in to begin with was the same. And then we have set aside $329,000 to date based on EDA action on one program. The one you just heard about was our emergency rental assistance program. And then the second was a land acquisition for Habitat for Humanity to build some homes for inclusion in our community land trust. So where do we go from here? I know this was a lot of information about 5 programs and we don't have the details of every program worked out, but we wanted to bring these recommendations forward at this time, allow you to ask questions and provide feedback. Some of the staff that participated in the work group are in the audience, and so I may need assistance from them to answer some of those questions. And then start to understand if there are any, if there's a consensus across any of these 5 program ideas yet. And if there is, staff could begin to work on program development. Obviously, we would need to come back to you before we do anything further. And then the last thing I want to note, just to sort of manage expectations, the LAHA law is very complicated. It's new. And so there will be some legal interpretations about what we can and can't spend the money on and how we might be able to accomplish our goals within the rules of that law. So it will take some time to work that out as we move forward. And then, of course, we're in the middle of a RFQ process for attorney services. So with that, I can try and answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gunlock. Are there questions from members of the board about these recommendations or feedback? Member Bauer.
On program number 3, the rehabilitation, renovation, replacement of manufactured homes, how is that selected given that we currently have a program for, we don't recall all the exact details, but definitely targeted to manufactured homes that we've had struggles with trying to use those funds, and I think we've even moved some money out of there previously. Do we have new ideas here for this that we hadn't in the past?
So thank you. That's a great question. We did have a manufactured home loan program, and after several failed attempts of getting people to utilize that program, we were never able to do that. I think some of that is because there was a grant program run by the county, so obviously a grant is more attractive than a loan. But also, there are just some struggles with what the owner of those manufactured home parks are willing to do or not do in terms of partnering with a government entity. There's been a language barrier with the people who live in the park. And so we did discuss that this could be challenging to implement, but we still believe it's a need. Some of those units are not in great shape. And so we didn't want to put too much focus on the practicality of actually implementing these programs before we understood what we thought the realm of need was. fully recognizing some of these are going to be far more difficult to implement than others for a variety of different reasons. And you've sort of tuned into some of the challenges with the manufactured home one noted as number 3.
Thank
Yeah.
you for that, because that helps. When looking at these options, I should think of them much more as just the ideas here, and then the next phase would be looking at the practicality of it going forward.
Absolutely, yeah.
That makes sense. I was really happy to see number 2. I think that is if we're giving feedback here, the program that I would strongly support for, especially since it really meets the goals that we have, which is to help, Minnesota or Roseville residents rather. These are people that are Roseville residents versus I think maybe some of the other ones like I think option 1 where that may not be Roseville residents. I could see that, especially with St. Paul closing our their encampments and such. We may have struggles, as you mentioned, with legal considerations here for these programs, getting that through. Also, I guess last question for number 1, would we be able to use LAHA funds possibly for the additional public safety that would be necessary for 1, or would that just, we would have to absorb that elsewhere?
So there are restrictions in the law, and I may defer to the EDA attorney on the details. There are restrictions in the law about what can be spent to administer a program. And so I believe we cannot spend money on, for example, funding our housing navigator's salary, whose sole purpose is to try and connect people to housing. The law says something about, and Ms. Tierney can maybe help me out here. The law says something to the effect that administrative costs can only be covered by people who work in the nonprofit housing arena, and I don't think city staff fall into that, so we can't use it for wages.
Okay, that'd be a good thing for us to look at when we look at the practicality, make sure that we're not incurring additional cost by trying to use these LAHA funds. Thank you.
Other comments, questions, Member Strawn?
Thank you. I know we've heard repeatedly, possibly from some of the same 1 or 2 people, about number 2 and the interest in having some type of chore service or other things available. I was, and I do think that 1 would be helpful to know, if we have a partner in mind or if there's someone who's reached out. I know that a couple of the churches have reached out wondering what the next thing is that they should do to be a partner with us. And I always kind of deferred back to you folks since I don't feel like I can be an ambassador. I do think there is a great tense need for number 3 to rehab and renovate the manufactured homes. And while I think there has been an issue, as you said, it went from a grant to a loan to possibly grant funding. But I do think that Operation Metro Surge and the care that the community provided to the mobile home park likely created some inroads and some trust that wasn't there previously. There were people, including some in this room, who were there many, many times as I drove by. And so I just know that there are many more trusted people. So if there was some of those folks and others were able to help be that ambassador or that liaison, that would be really beneficial. And I was curious to know if 5 was predicated on maybe work that Ms. McCullough, who I see is here, has done in the community, if that was a thought to try to get people who were maybe having housing issues or housing concerns into long-term housing situations.
So I think there were a few things there, so I'll try and go back to the first one regarding program number 2, and you had mentioned churches have reached out and tried to find a way to be helpful in this arena. I think we were thinking we could partner with an organization who's been doing this. I believe they used to operate out of Roseville. They don't anymore. It's called, the mayor may know.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think the partnering with the churches was for number 1, as I understood it.
Was for number
2 was
1.
understood to be
Yep.
partnering with the entity that you have identified here.
Okay, yep.
Maybe I'm wrong. That's what I understood the question.
I think that there's been kind of overall interest in trying to find a way. And I know in some other communities, they may have like a block nurse affiliated with their church who is service to the community. And I think some of the people who've reached out to us have indicated that they thought that was a lack. Of course, we can't really get a community in the, unless we help or we're partnered with someone else to get that set up.
So for the first idea, in terms of partnering with a church, it wouldn't have to be a church. It could be some other sort of mission-driven organization. But one component that we talked about in the group was we really recognize that a dedicated caseworker who is familiar with how to maybe address some of the needs of people who would use a facility like this, we could pay for that dedicated caseworker. So we're not relying solely on the church or the mission-driven organization and the membership that they have to run this. They're merely involved because they have space. It sort of aligns with the goals that maybe as a business or a nonprofit, whatever organization, they'd be interested in partnering with us. Help at my door, obviously that's someone who's already doing this, and so they would be willing to partner with us. And then I think you had the last question about program number 5. That kind of came up, I think we broadly talked about it with the group, but maybe even Carrie mentioned that sometimes we interact with people who have a stable job, they earn income, but they just can't pull together last month's rent and a security deposit. And then if you also look at some of the details of that item in the one-pager I attached to the packet, I didn't put it up here, there may also be a need to sort of find some rental housing properties in town who might be willing to work with the city, that maybe these people have something on their record from a long time ago that's really prohibiting them from gaining housing, but it's really not necessarily, or it's a very minor sort of barrier that if there was a partnership with the city to provide that down payment assistance, they'd be willing to take on that renter. So that was one component that factored into the conversation we had regarding this program number 5.
Thank you. And any additional comments about the manufactured homes or any additional change, again, with what Member Bauer mentioned as far as the inroads we've struggled with?
Going back to practically how we implement these, we haven't worked all of that out. And so if number 3 is something that there's consensus on and that you want us to develop further, I think a strong piece to that would be seeing if the owner is willing to work with us and then figuring out a very specific sort of engagement or communication plan, maybe some trusted partners that can help us communicate with the people who live in that development. But that's probably going to be the single biggest challenge there.
Thank you.
Other questions or feedback? Member Groff?
The manufactured home rehabilitation or renovation, are those rented by the individuals and owned by the owner of the park, or is there a mix?
There's a mix. Some own and some rent.
So that's another complication, which would have to be worked out in the. I get this is just a beginning step.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about some of those things. I can tell you number 5, down payment assistance to secure rental housing. I just had someone 2 weeks ago contact me who was living in Roseville, had moved here for a job, married, but spouses in school, and 3 children, and they were staying in one of our extended hotel places. But with paying their monthly rent and having 3 children and groceries, they had a terrible time getting the first and last month's rent scraped together so that they could move. We did finally manage it, and I don't usually deal with rentals, but they were a referral from some people. So I know that's a need, and it was a need that was in Roseville here. So I'm very aware of that one. And I would like to hear more about that. And I don't think that one is as difficult to find out information on as the manufactured home. I would actually be interested in all 5 of them, but I would probably try to do the ones that are easier first, just because maybe we can get something, done quicker.
Because there is a timeline to spend the money.
Yes.
Right, certainly. I would just add, I think that I also am interested in seeing if we can, pursue opportunities for all 5 of these, but they may come in different stages in terms of the timing, as was noted, especially as to how easy or difficult they are to do and how much research we have to do on the legal side of things as well. But certainly, I think helping with the manufactured homes, if we can do something that can make a difference there, I think that's important. And just for the record, I did double check, it is help at your door instead of help at my door.
Sorry.
But anyway, that's probably most important to that organization, that we name them correctly. For the conversation purposes, that what they do is a number of services for people who aren't able to get out and do shopping and other things on their own. And they were based in Roseville at one point a number of years ago. So I think all of them have potential, and all of them can help and make a difference in housing in Roseville. The one thing I would also note is that even if we do, some number of these and use the LAHA funds for that, I don't anticipate that necessarily is going to use up all of the funds we have available, especially if the program continues and we continue to get something like $500,000 every year into the program, depending on the sales tax collections. We're always going to have new funds that could potentially accumulate more quickly than we're able to spend them with a certain number of programs. And the only reason I mention that is because that gives us the opportunity to have some flexibility if a project comes along that needs assistance, whether it's similar to the Habitat land trust acquisition cost assistance, or if we, at some point in the world of affordable housing, there's a project that comes forward which we've sort of prioritized with our other forms of assistance that provides some of the housing for those lower levels of average median income, in the 30% or to 50% range, where sometimes that has to come with services and things like that. If we can look at our LAHA funds as backup gap funding for some of those projects, I know I think we had some feedback from a member of the community, an email to the council or to the board here, concerned that there was some expression in the materials about, we haven't focused on affordable housing because we've done so much of it. I think the thing we wanted to make sure is that we focused our city needs at the time. The decision was to focus our city assistance more towards those unmet needs in the community rather than sort of the needs that we seem to have been able to easily meet with the development community and the assistance we had been providing. I mean, certainly we've provided numerous units in our community in the 50 to 80% AMI. And so I think the thought there was just we want to make sure our resources are focused in areas where there continues to be a greater need. And so we just need to make sure we're working with these funds and other sources to do the best we can in the most different ways, is how I look at it anyway. And so I certainly don't think that doing one or more of these 5 things or all of these 5 things precludes us from using these funds for other legally appropriate purposes to help with housing. So that's my feedback. Didn't necessarily expect a staff response to that. That was mostly feedback. I don't think there was a question in there. Oh, no, there was a question. I'm sorry. So just in relation to what I just mentioned about the sort of deeply affordable housing and the marketplace for that, I mean, have we seen out there that there are developers that are getting into those and there's some likelihood something like that could be happening in Roseville, or is it still something that just doesn't seem to be pursued by those who do these types of projects, at least in interest in Roseville doesn't seem to be there maybe?
So Jeannie fields most of the day-to-day inquiries from affordable housing developers. What I do know is that we have not been approached recently by any developer who is interested in building a new affordable housing development that is solely for sort of the deeply affordable. I think, 30% AMI. Those typically are only able to be accomplished with Section 8 vouchers, whether it's a project-based Section 8 or an individual household has a voucher that they can go and shop around for their housing. But I am not aware of any specific inquiry about a project for deeply affordable housing to date, no. We've got a few.
Is that something that can be packaged with other levels of affordability, and sometimes a project may be able to go more easily in that case, or?
There are certainly multiple assistance pieces that have to be packaged together to make those work. LAHA certainly could be one. Sometimes it's not the one-time assistance, though. It's the ongoing assistance that becomes problematic. But I can certainly appreciate your comment that if and when something does come along and we need some additional funding to sort of patch it out and make it work, not having every single dollar of LAHA programmed gives us some flexibility to do that, and that could maybe be something that comes along in the future.
Great, thank you. All right. Are there other questions or feedback from members of the EDA? Otherwise, I do want to open it up for members of the public to provide some feedback as well on these recommendations and thoughts or questions. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this, this would be the time to do so. We've got the microphone available at the table. All right.
Got one coming.
And we'll just remind folks to introduce yourself with your name and street or address to begin your comments, to direct comments or questions to the council, and we do have a 3-minute time limit.
Sure.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi, Carrie Gelly, Roseville resident near Dale Street and Highway 36. And I just appreciate getting this update on these initiatives. And also, I think what has already been said, I would just reinforce there's definitely a need for item number 3, that particular idea. Definitely a need. And there are networks that have been built out since January into the community. And there are definitely challenges with just people's level of organization when they're going through crisis or they have a lot of financial burdens, et cetera. So, but yes, lean on the network of the community. And I agree with the mayor kind of in your previous comment about the 8 households that were helped. The needs everywhere. And the more outreach that can happen, the better, just in general. That's what I would say. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item? All right. So at this point, do we have, does the board feel like, I know it's been expressed at least in a couple of instances, to sort of at least take some next steps to look at perhaps all of these? Do we want to maybe have a direction along those lines and then a check-in at an appropriate point after that, or do we want to focus on certain ones at this point, or any feedback from the board in that regard, Member Strawn?
Well, I feel like there's universal agreement on number 2. So is that something that we could move forward with, kind of more actively trying to find that partnership, establishing what a budget would be around that, so we can get started on some of the funding, the dispersal. But I do think, to me, 3 and 5 seem less, to me, the 3 that seem the least problematic as far as so many compliance and making sure that pieces of housing, anytime you're getting into housing, you're dealing with, just so many inspections and background checks and things like that of staff and things like that. So for me, it seems like 2, 3, and 5 seem to be maybe have a few less encumbrances. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I don't know. But I just feel like 2 anyway. It feels like there's strong support that maybe we could move that one kind of the top of the list and look at maybe 3 and 5 or 5 and 3, just to kind of take them in the order of the challenge of them, not to dismiss the other 2, but to just say these seem like the ones that we could get off the ground the soonest and start utilizing the funds, but we could still look at other options.
Other thoughts, Member Bauer?
I'd agree. I think 2, 3, and 5 makes sense. I think 2 is ideal because I think there's a great opportunity there for the most disbursement of funds. 5, I don't know if we'll be able to do that since it's a down payment. It's going to come back to us, and so I have some real legal challenges, concerns there. But that's a practical issue for you to take a look at. But I'd be comfortable with looking at 2, 3, and 5 going forward.
Other feedback from members? Member Groff?
I would agree with that, but I kind of want to lean on staff to see what's doable the most quickly, because I don't want us to get bogged down with one of these items that's really difficult. And, so if I don't know how to express this exactly because I don't want to put too much on staff here either, because I know you've done a lot of research already and a lot of meetings, but if you could kind of find out what would be the easiest ones to do, and I would say start with those, but 2, 3, and 5 are probably the ones that I would start with if that's reasonable.
So I think I would just add that I'm not sure sitting here that I can say that 2, 3, and 5 are the easiest to implement the most quickly, or that, the thing about number 2 that comes to mind is that that may be the one that may have the least synergy with the legislation that created LAHA in the sense of helping with housing affordability and some of those things. So it might be the easiest one to implement and the least in line with what the law allows us to do. Once again, not being a legal expert, not being an expert in a lot of these areas, I'm just speculating there. But so my point there is that I think what I tried to say with my initial thought was that I think everybody needs to look into all of these maybe a little bit more, just one more step, to see where they go. And I would be happy to sort of get feedback that might be counter to what our assumptions were here as to what might be the ones that we can implement the most quickly. Because I don't think there's any reason we don't implement quick ones quickly and then do a little more work on some of the other ones. And because we still have these funds coming in, as we said, and we still have, the deadlines to be able to expend those funds. And I would much rather that we take the action we can as quickly as we can and find out a little bit more. And it may become fairly obvious that there's some that just either don't fit the legal framework or that for whatever reason can't find partners or things like that, and we can sort of set those on the back burner and focus on the others. But I'm willing to defer to the folks that are going to be doing some of that research to maybe come back to us and let us know how right our assumptions were, if that makes sense.
I'd be happy to support that.
I agree with you.
Okay. So I think we have the general notion of 2, 3, and 5, but let's hear some more about the other ones as well, if that makes sense. All right. Thank you again to the interdepartmental group, and hopefully that group continues through this process and into the next step here and continues to bring ideas forward as well, because it doesn't, just because we've had this discussion this evening on these 5 recommendations certainly doesn't mean that we're done thinking about this or done coming up with ideas or hearing ideas from the community, which is an important part of course, our public decision-making process as well. So thanks again to everyone, and we look forward to the next steps here. That then brings us to a discussion regarding the preliminary budget and tax levy for the Roseville Economic Development Authority for 2027. Once again, Ms. Gunlock, our Community Development Director, is back with us to bring the proposed 2027 budget and tax levy for the EDA for our initial consideration here this evening. Welcome back.
Thank you, President, members of the board. Every year, the EDA is tasked with making a recommendation to the City Council on an Economic Development Authority preliminary budget and levy for the next year. As you can see from the packet materials, staff is proposing a preliminary budget and levy of $389,347. No program or personnel changes are proposed for 27, and nearly all of the budget increases are inflationary. And I'll go through that in just a minute. I also want to just highlight that staff is proposing to fund an existing program that has a annual budget or cost of about $11,000 from Access Cash Balance and EDA Fund 722. This is our abatement fund. Hopefully this is not news to you because we did talk about it at a meeting on May 11th where we discussed the abatement fund in a little bit more detail. I'm going to go through some really quick notes, but rather than prepare a presentation, I just wanted to put something on the overhead camera. So if they could switch to the overhead camera, I'll go through some brief details quickly. There are several budget additions for 2027. There's about $6,400 of added personnel costs. The EDA funds 1.5 FTE, so this is personnel costs, salary, wages, benefits. I'd zoom in, but I don't see the remote here anywhere. We have also increased the amount of money that we're budgeting for professional services for legal support. This sort of relates to the item we just talked about. We think there's going to be a much bigger need for legal expertise as we start to develop this LAHA program or programs, and so we did double the amount of money we are budgeting for that help. There is a administrative service charge increase of almost $9,000. I'm right-sizing our memberships and subscriptions costs based on what we're actually purchasing. It's very minor. And then all of our Metro INET costs are being allocated to divisions now. And you probably look at the 6,068 number and you're like, well, the packet says $6,268. The difference is we had previously budgeted for some minor, or not 200, it's slightly higher than that. We had previously budgeted some software costs to the EDA in the past, but now it's everything. And so that's why I adjusted that number slightly. And then in terms of cuts to the budget, as I mentioned, we're taking out that $11,000 for the energy efficient ownership programs that our homeowners can benefit from or take advantage from. Those are administered through CEE. We're still going to continue to offer all of those programs. They're just going to be paid from a different source. And then we've reduced some transportation and mileage reimbursements just to sort of align with what we've actually been spending the last couple of years. And so with these additions and cuts, the proposed net change to the budget from 2026 to 2027 is an increase of $24,521. This is a 6.7% increase over 2026 budget. In terms of the levy impact, that's a slightly different story. You may recall in 2026, we decided to fund the budget with $100,000 of reserves. Staff is not proposing to use any reserves for 2027. So the actual levy for this budget goes up to $124,521, which is an increase of 47% over the 2026 EDA levy. Because remember, the total levy amount is still $389,347. Just to kind of wrap up, the bylaws do require a recommendation be forwarded to the City Council. This occurs before the City Council takes their action on the maximum levy that they need to adopt in September. We do this by resolution. The resolution is in your packet. It really just reflects the overall budget and levy amount at the bottom of that first page. You can either adopt that tonight or we can bring it back in September, depending on the feedback or direction that we receive tonight regarding this information. So I'm happy to address any questions or concerns you might have at this time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kunlock. I did want to just, because the decision on last year was to use existing fund balance for a portion of the operating budget to the tune of about $100,000. And part of the rationale there was that the fund balance was such that we were well above our, recommended balance for cash flow purposes. And I was trying to find it in the report, and I didn't find it. So if you could just maybe help us see where the fund was at the end of this last year, or wherever that analysis point is, and where we think it would be in 2027, and how that relates to using the levy for the full funding of the operating costs.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So back when the decision was made to use $100,000 of reserves, the cash balance in the EDA General Fund, Fund 725, was fairly large. I believe it was well over $500,000, if not even higher. Then early in the year, we had a lot of conversations about our existing housing programs, our community land trust partnership, all of these different piles of money and what we could use to keep these programs going. And so since that time, decisions have been made to use some of that fund balance to help support some of those existing programs, namely the community land trust partnership. I ran the cash balance in Fund 725 last week, and it's at $321,000 about. Given we need to keep about $35,000 of our budget in reserves,
Or 35%?
35%, sorry. Okay. That equates to about $137,000 would be our target balance. And we're at $321,500. So there's still some excess cash balance there. One item I've noted in the report, but I'm not necessarily asking for a recommendation at this time, is through all of this accounting and examination of the EDA's fund balance, we discovered about $70,500 that should have been moved out of the general fund to our small business loan fund never occurred. And because so much time has passed. We didn't want to move it until the EDA was aware of that and made that sort of action. And so you may or may not weigh that into the decision about the health of our current fund balance of 725 and what you want to do with that money, but I did want to note that.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate that additional information. Questions or feedback from members of the board on the proposed budget and levy for 2027? Member Bauer.
Thank you for your work on this budget. I guess, not so much a question for staff, but as a note for the board here is, I see that we're spending $40,000 again for the Rice Larpenteur Alliance this year. I know we've discussed last budget, possibly discontinuing that. I would be in favor of discontinuing our participation in the Rice Larpenteur Alliance. And it started in 2019. At that time, it made a lot of sense. I believe it was 2019. Made a lot of sense and delivered what we needed. However, what was proposed never arrived. The work that's currently being done, as someone that lives probably of all of us the closest to that area, I don't really see much happening there. I know when buildings have gone up for sale, the Rice Larpenteur Alliance hasn't been aware of that, or they didn't know that's happening. Currently, there's a number of buildings for sale there. No real effort, no real plan on them. I just can't, have a hard time justifying spending another $40,000 next year on this. I believe other municipalities are reconsidering it as well. So that's a discussion I'd be willing to have here with the board. But I'm not seeing $40,000 of value. And really, it's not $40,000. It's almost $300,000 if we go back to 2019. And that would really help us with these budget additions of $36,000 to then not incur additional levy cost while still maintaining, healthy reserves.
Right. Other thoughts or questions from members of the board? Member Strawn.
I just wanted to point out to the public that over the last how many years, the EDA has had, their budget has been flat or decreased, maybe the last 3-4 years for sure. So at some point, especially given the reallocation of the Metro INOC costs and the professional services agreements that we know will be increasing, I think it's reasonable to expect an increase. And again, we utilized cash balance we used reserves from elsewhere for last year, but we do need to make sure that we keep all of the funds in a good spot. So it looks harsh on paper, but really it reflects thoughtful consideration for a number of years. So if you looked back over a period of time, people, I really appreciate your ongoing dedication. So I do know that you take this very, with a lot of forethought, and you really think it through. And I feel like we, when it's time to increase, it's very intentional, and I think people need to honor and respect that we have been given the opportunity for a number of years to not have the EDA levy increase.
Right. Other thoughts, questions? Member Graff.
Well, yeah, I do appreciate that you have not raised the levy for several years. I appreciate that. But I still think we have to look carefully at all the numbers, and I don't know if I'm ready to state anything on the levy right tonight. The one balance you're talking about is, $389,000, and required amount is $136,000. I don't know if there are things coming up in this next year or two. I mean, we can't get them down to the minimum, because we know how that can be a problem in this type of work. So I think it needs some careful thought.
All right. Couple of notes. This is certainly a preliminary not to exceed, so at this point, we could just recommend the full recommendation and then have some of these discussions as we go through the budget process. The other thing, I just wanted to spend a moment on the Rice and Larpenteur Association, since that was brought up. And, I think it's important to understand that the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance, not association, is not a redevelopment agency. So the funding doesn't go towards, for instance, securing properties that are for sale and trying to facilitate development. in that sense. They developed guidelines and objectives for development, which guide all the 3 communities, as well as Ramsey County, to the extent Ramsey County is involved. I would say that it is very likely that the proposed G line bus rapid transit on Rice Street from downtown St. Paul would probably not be as high a priority with Metro Transit, were it not for the advocacy of the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance and the member cities. I would also note that we were able to secure assistance from the U.S., I think it's the U.S. EPA Assistance for Brownfields program at no cost. They did about a year and a half of work and paid for a consultant to develop an inventory of all the properties in the corridor and their status in terms of brownfields and need of assistance and their ownership status, and so that it's something that's assistance to both the communities and their development departments, as well as to those who are looking to potentially do development in the area. So that is something that is a benefit of that program. A lot of what the city's funding over the years for the cities, plural funding for that alliance has been, is to pay some of the administrative costs that are not typically funded by grant programs and things like that. Your Minnesota Foundation or your other foundations that don't often fund administrative costs as easily or as likely as they fund specific programs. And so it has allowed the organization to continue to do the work it does. And I forgot to mention the first thing on my list, which is a lot of community building in that neighborhood in all 3 cities. There are the annual festivals. There are 3 of them. There's one in St. Paul, which is coming up on August 12th, I believe, this year, which is the 15th. Thank you. Which is the summer block party, which will be in St. Paul. There was just in May the Community in Bloom event in Roseville at McCarran's Park, and then in the wintertime we have the winter warm-up event in Maplewood, on the corner in Maplewood. All of these things, it's not just sort of feel-good things, but we've gotten a number of feedback from members of the community how it really does build community, and so I don't want to discount that. I should also say that the RLA has been administrating both county and City of St. Paul funds for things like small business facade improvements, small business signage, and a number of programs like that that really are a benefit to the entrepreneurial efforts of people who are relatively new to this area, let alone to this country, who have been doing amazing things in small businesses in that community, especially replacing things like the former lamplighter establishment and some of the others in that area. So I don't want to discount. I think personally, from my perspective, $40,000 a year from the city of Roseville is kind of a bargain for what we're getting out of it. And so I would definitely not be in favor, but I would certainly welcome the conversation. And I've given you a bit of a preview of it there. Other thoughts or feedback from councilmen or members of the board? Member Bauer first.
I'm fine having that conversation. I'd really enjoy having that, and I won't debate it here at this time, but I'm more than comfortable having a future agenda item to debate that.
Right, certainly that can be part of the budget process for the EDA, no question. Member Groff, thank you.
I was just going to say thanks for the reminder on all those things, because, as they happen over a number of years, you tend to forget how much has happened in that community. It's easy to just say, well, we aren't where we want it to be, or it isn't, a new west end of St. Louis Park or something like that. But that's not the way things like that work. So I think it was a good reminder of all the work that's been done.
Right. Member Strawn.
I would just add, I have been to many of the festivals and many of the events, and they really are great community building events. If it was only that, but I drove by on my bike a couple weeks ago, and it's much more maneuverable on my bike than it used to be, thanks in part to the advocacy from the folks there. But to see the grocery store where the lamplighter used to be really changes that corner and what livability for the people who are there. Many years ago, I lived farther down Rice Street, and it really has changed that whole tenor. And yeah, it's not the west end of St. Louis Park, but I don't know that anyone anticipated it would be. It's affordable housing. It's a place where people who can't afford many other options, and we want them to feel safe and to be part of our community as well. So I would welcome the discussion, but I feel strongly at the moment that it is something that it would have to be really a real strong conviction for why we would get rid of that partnership at this point.
Right, so I think we are either supposed to do something this evening in terms of recommending this to the council, or we would need to schedule a meeting between now and the end of September for the board to do that. Actually, there may be another board meeting on the calendar before then anyway.
Yep. We can bring this back for the EDA's discussion on September 2nd, I believe is the next EDA meeting, which I believe is before the city
it's
council
before the
takes their action on the preliminary levy.
Otherwise, I'd make a motion to adopt the preliminary not to exceed tax levy for the E EDA.
Well, we've got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we've got a motion to, and I think that would be to recommend to the council,
Yes.
since we're not adopting at this point. Motion by Member Strawn, seconded by Member Groff to make the recommendation as presented, I'm presuming.
Yeah.
All right. Discussion on that motion. Is the maker of the motion?
Again, thank you for your work and thank you for the many things that we are discussing here.
All right.
I don't know if you were going to open this up for public comment, but I just wanted to make a brief one if that's possible, or is this available for public comment?
That's a good point. I guess we were kind of getting ahead of ourselves in that sense. So why don't we pause the motion process? It's been made and seconded, but we can pause that for public input and certainly open it up for public comment.
I just wanted to make a comment as a Roseville resident.
May you introduce yourself,
Yes,
of
Noelle
course.
Bakken. I live on Carroll Place in Roseville. I am also a board member of the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance. I've been working with them for almost 5 years at this point. Just wanted to echo Mayor Rowe's comments about the value that the organization brings to the community, and also the value that the Roseville's contribution brings to the board to the organization, as far as allowing it to help fund the operational activities of the alliance. It's really difficult to find funding that doesn't have strings attached for, very specific programming reasons. They've also done quite a bit for the business community as far as helping business owners make replacements such as new front doors, storefront improvements, things of that nature, as well as Mayor Strawn mentioned the Rice Street construction improvements with the bike lanes that will be coming between County Road B and Wheelock in the next couple of years. The Alliance was a very big part of opening up locations for people to make comments on that and to engage with the county on their reconstruction project. So just wanted to really push again as a member of the community that I strongly am in favor of continuing that funding going forward. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And we should open it up for anyone else from the public who wishes to comment in regard to the proposed 2027 EDA budget and tax levy. All right. Seeing no further comments, then we do have the motion before us, and the maker of the motion was about to have an opportunity. Mr. Trudgeon?
Just for clarification, is the motion to approve the resolution that's in the packet? There is a
I believe
resolution.
it would be, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
was.
thank you for reminding us of the resolution, or the revolution.
No, not a
Okay.
Just the resolution tonight.
All right. Member Strawn is the maker of the motion. Or I should say maybe Mayor Strawn is the maker of the motion.
No, don't want
Okay,
that.
all
Member Strawn continues that motion as recommended in the packet. I have nothing further.
Okay. Member Groff is the seconder of the motion.
And this again is a not to exceed, so of course there can be further discussion and we can talk about all of these things in more detail. I do want to hear Member Schroeder's comments too, and she's not here this evening.
All right. Other discussion on the motion? All right. Once again, we've got the motion before us to adopt the resolution which recommends the preliminary not to exceed budget and tax levy for the Economic Development Authority to the City Council for potential adoption at the end of September. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously 4-0, and that will come back. And I think we should probably just plan on having some potential further budget discussions in our September meeting.
Yes.
All right. That brings us to the end of our business items for the EDA this evening. There being no further business before the Economic Development Authority, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Member Groff and seconded by Member Bauer to adjourn. There is no motion on there's no discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously 4-0. We are adjourned at 7:04 p.m. and there'll be a brief break while we reconfigure for the council meeting. All right, I hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, July 20th, 2026 at 7:06 p.m. The roll call will stand as called previously for the Economic Development Authority with all members present except for Councilmember Schroeder, who was not able to be here. I did forget to do introductions at the beginning of the EDA meeting, which I'm sure caught the attention of those who are about to be introduced. That is our City Attorney, Rachel Tierney, who's on my right at the end of the dais, and our City Manager, Pat Trudgeon, who's on my left at the other end of the dais. And as I mentioned, Councilmember Schroeder is not able to be here this evening. Also, I should point out that we'll be making introductions of various staff and guests as agenda items come forward, so stay tuned for that. And I'll just reiterate for members of the public who may just be tuning in now or just may have arrived to the meeting that we do have copies of the agenda available for everyone in the public who's attending this evening if they wish to follow along. They're on the table in the back of the room by the back door. We do also have one complete set of all the meeting materials, which is available to be shared by the public for reference if you're interested in seeing what the council has before us this evening. With that, I'll also do a quick reminder for folks that have cell phones to make sure that they're silenced or otherwise don't disrupt our meeting this evening. We did take care of the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the council meeting, so we won't repeat that. We do have to consider approving our agenda for the council meeting, and so I'll turn it over to Mr. Trudgeon first. Are there any staff-initiated changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I contacted the council earlier today. The request to perform an abatement at 2147 Rice Street, agenda item 7A. The work has been done, and we are no longer in need of an abatement, so you can remove that totally from the agenda for consideration tonight.
All right, that was item 7A. All right, and no other items changed?
There are no other changes.
All right, look to the council. Are there any changes that the council would like to make to the agenda this evening, or items council members would like removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Does not appear to be the case. We'll do a quick check with members of the public who are here this evening. If anybody is here to make a comment or ask a question on an item in our consent agenda, which is section 10 of tonight's agenda, it's at the bottom of page 1 and carries over onto page 2. There's a decent number of items on there, but these are usually taken up at the end of the meeting as rather administrative items. And so if somebody was here this evening to comment or ask a question about one of those items, this would be the time to let us know, and we can move it forward in the meeting for that public input. So I'll check with members of the public. Is there anyone here for an item in section 10 of tonight's agenda? All right, does not appear to be the case. With that, then, we have our agenda as proposed with the exception of item 7A, which has been removed and does not need to be considered this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented with that change?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Bauer, seconded by Councilmember Groff. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously 4-0. We have our agenda for this evening. And now we had foregone our general public comment at the start of the EDA meeting, but we will make sure and take that up at the start of our council meeting here. This is our first opportunity for public comment. And once again, this is intended for public comment of a general nature that may be related to city business that isn't on tonight's agenda or is of interest to people in the community. Once again, we'll make sure and provide opportunity. Well, as we proved during the EDA meeting, even with a little help, we'll provide an opportunity for public comment on agenda items as they come up. But we do want to once again provide this general opportunity for public comment. So this would be the chance for that now. And as a reminder to members of the public, just to refresh the rules, we do have the 3-minute time limit per speaker. We do ask that you state your name and street or address to begin your comments. Direct comments and questions to the council. If we're not able to answer questions this evening, we may have to follow up after the meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to our first speaker. Welcome.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, Carrie Gelly, Dale in 36. And I just have a couple things to mention. You may be aware of the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office having a meeting tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. regarding gang violence in the county. 6 p.m. in Arden Hills. You can search it up and you'll easily find the address and where it is. The public is all invited to come listen and give feedback. So I think as council members and mayor and staff, I highly encourage anyone who can attend to do so. The second thing, you may have seen a recent Star Tribune article about police searching on behalf of immigration. I'm not going to say this title right, but searching the Twin Cities flock cameras for license plate information for ICE during Operation Metro Surge. My expectation is that did not occur in Roseville, based on community input and the resolutions that have been passed and all that sort of thing. But just, bringing it to people's attention. And then another recent article about Columbia Heights discontinuing use of flock cameras. I'm not sure if that's a permanent move, but it's something that's been going on. Another comment I want to make is thank you for bringing the update this evening on the Safe and Sustainable Cities Coalition. I personally can't stay physically for that, but I will be observing later on from home, and just very appreciative of getting an update on that. The last point I'd like to make is that many of us are probably aware of recent uptick in immigration enforcement activity across the country. Certainly in the state of Minnesota, there have been increased detentions, and most people are aware of the violent tactics that still seem to persist and the deaths of 2 people coming out of ICE actions in the last something like 10 days. So I just bring that up from the point of view that community is still engaged. We are still concerned to protect our neighbors. We're still looking out for each other. And we still expect that our council and our local law enforcement and anybody in city government is doing the same. So thank you for that. Let's just all stay aware, stay safe. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else from the public to speak under general public comment this evening? All right, does not appear to be the case. We have heard from a couple of people in the community, in addition to the comments this evening, in relation to the automated license plate reader technology and our flock cameras. So I was a little bit prepared, and I wanted to note, and we did receive a memo as a council from the chief reminding us of the policies that were adopted with the input of the community earlier this year. We do also, as part of our transparency page on the police department web page, have a page dedicated to automated license plate reader technology and the city's policies and information related to that. We do also have a link there to the Flock portal that's run by the Flock organization that has a lot of the stats on City of Roseville, access to that information specifically with numbers about requests and things like that. Certainly people can check that out and gain information that way. And I'm sure that the chief and the leadership of the department would be more than happy to answer questions from members of the public based on that information that's out there, or if they just have general questions and aren't as aware and haven't been to that site. But I did want to note one of the things that was of note to me was the list of the agencies with whom we have the contractual relationship to allow access to Roseville data. And I think that's important information to put out there because we don't just make the data available to any random public safety entity. There has to be that relationship. That's part of our policy. And I did a quick check, and it didn't appear. But I don't want to guarantee that those entities weren't ones that were mentioned in the story. But it didn't appear to be the case, as I did a quick check of that. So wanted to make the public aware of that. And certainly, if I'm mistaken in that, please let us know. With that, once again, thank you for that public comment, and we'll then proceed to our recognitions and donations portion of our agenda. And we did have one item there, which is a proclamation for the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which will be observed in July of this year. And so the action would be to hear me read the proclamation and then a motion by the council to approve. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas since 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act has focused on ending discrimination against individuals with disabilities and promoting full integration and participation in society. And whereas approximately 20% of Americans have a disability as defined by the EDA, a number projected to increase as our society ages. And whereas, as a direct result of the passage of the ADA, an increased number of children and adults with disabilities are living, playing, working, and shopping alongside their neighbors. And whereas Roseville is becoming inclusive and free of physical communication, and social barriers. And whereas state and local government services are continually improving and providing increasingly accessible services and programs to Minnesotans with disabilities, and where state and local governments, including Roseville, are beginning to understand the importance and relevance of providing accessible digital information and electronic services to Minnesotans with disabilities, not the least of which because of requirements under the ADA. And whereas on this 36th anniversary of the ADA, we celebrate and recognize the progress that has been made, we acknowledge the challenges that still exist in our horizon, and we reaffirm our commitment to full equity and inclusion for all. Now therefore be resolved, the City of Roseville hereby declares that we observe July 26, 2026 as the anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act, and encourage others to recognize that anniversary as well.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Groff to adopt that resolution or that proclamation. Discussion on the motion? Councilmember
Thankfully,
Strawn.
there are legal requirements that continue to move us forward, but may we all be aware and continue to advocate on behalf of those with disabilities.
Right. Other discussion?
And yeah, you know, it isn't something that's like one and done. It's something that you go work on constantly. And I really appreciate the disability community interacting with us and letting us know when things don't quite work right for them and how we can, as a city, improve those services and make it work better for them. And of course, I want to mention the playground that, of course, is inclusive, because I'm very pleased with that results of that, so kids can play together with no matter what their abilities are.
I think more and more cities are looking to install playgrounds that are inclusive like that. The other thing I wanted to note, and I think it's come up in some of our prior discussions related to specific aspects of the Americans with Disabilities Act or other issues in the community with respect to disability, is that not all disabilities are visible and obvious to people. And I think that's important to remember as well as we're thinking about the things that we can do to be more inclusive, is that it's not always something that's clear and visible and obvious to people, but nonetheless can be very, very challenging in the lives of those individuals. With that, we do have the motion before us to adopt the proclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, 4-0, and that proclamation is approved. That then brings us, I believe, to our business items this evening, and we don't have item 7A. The abatement has been dealt with, as was previously mentioned, and so that brings us right then to 7B, which is to receive a presentation on the results and analysis of our community survey that was performed earlier this year. We have our communications and community relations manager, Corey Yunke, with us. Do you like how I elided that mistake on your title fairly smoothly until I mentioned it just then? Corey Yunke is with us this evening to introduce our survey consultant and bring the results to us. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Yunke and stop talking before I get myself into more trouble.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members, and thanks for the opportunity to share the results from our 2026 community survey. To walk us through the methodology, key findings, and trends, I'd like to welcome Peter Leatherman from the Morris Leatherman Company. Peter has worked in Roseville on several community surveys over the years, and I'm glad that he's here to help present. Unless there are any questions at this point, I'll turn it over to Peter.
Welcome, Mr. Leatherman.
Pleasure. Yeah, for many years, I think the first one I worked on was back in 95 or 96. So we're going on 30 years of doing surveys in Roseville, either for the city or the school district. Just to review with everybody what we undertook for the city. We spoke with 400 randomly selected residents across the community. Interviews were conducted between June 18th and July 9th. Average interview time was 21 minutes. We had 7% stay on the phone with us for over 1 hour of their own volition. They're the historians of the community. It's always, you get these longer city surveys, it's always fun to see who takes the longest. Non-response rate, 6.5%. 400 samples, always projectable to plus or minus 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. The margin of error is determined by the size of the sample, not the percent of the population. So 400 in the community, a 400 in Ramsey County, or 400 across the state will always be plus or minus 5%. Putting up some demographics, cell phone only households, 69%. Landline, they still exist, 12%, and then both landline and cell phone households at 19%. Continuing with demographics. First, how long has the respondent lived in the city of Roseville? 26% have been in the community for 5 years or less, while 29% have been here for over 20 years. The typical resident comes in roughly at about 11 and a half years of longevity in the community. Equal number of households with children versus households with seniors. 28% each. Homeowners, 2 to 1, renters, 34%. 24% are 18 to 34-year-olds, 36% are over 35 to 54, and then 41% are over the age of 55. So the typical resident comes in right at about 51 years old. The financial situation of the household. This is yo-yoed since the pandemic, going up and down, up and down. We were on a trend line going down in the fourth quarter of 2025 and going into the first couple months of 2026. Since the conflict with Iran and gas prices and everything, we were in the low 30s on that number in the fourth quarter last year. We're creeping now back up, and you're at the 40% level. I ran 2 school districts today. They were at 42 and 44%. So we do have about a 10-point increase in the last 3 months on the financial number of people financially stressed. So that is in line. Continuing with demographics, 63% indicated white, 13% African American, 10% Asian Pacific Islander, 7% Hispanic Latino, 1% Native American, and 7% multiracial. Women outnumbered men by 5 points, with 1% indicating non-binary. And then dividing the city with Highway 36 and Snelling Avenue, you can see the division with the northeast portion of the city being 31%, southeast 28%, southwest 22%, and the northwest 20%. Any questions on methodology or demographics before I get into it?
Maybe just a clarifying question. Are these numbers, on the both of these last 2 slides, the respondents?
Yes.
As opposed to the actual demographics, maybe from census data or something like that?
Correct. Yeah, we
And
do.
how does that generally compare,
Yeah.
have you noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do the demographics for twofold. First off, so we can look at differences between attitudes and opinions. How do households with children feel versus households with seniors or homeowners versus renters? But the first thing they're used for is to validate it against updated census information. And the census has a margin of error, but it is is a very narrow margin of error on some key factors, that being households with children, households with seniors, and homeowners versus renters. So we use it to track ethnicity, a little bit wider margin of error, but on all of those within the plus or minus 5%.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Any other?
Great.
All right, survey says. I would suggest for the next time, if you do another survey in the future, it's time to take out before the pandemic. Because public opinion has changed rapidly, and it's now very much stabilized. Folks are just less happy now than they were back before the pandemic. It's always difficult to get Minnesotans to be enthusiastic about everything, but we're less enthusiastic about everything nowadays. So if we just focus on the trend lines of 24 and 26, the quality of life, 87% last time, 90% this time. Across the metro area, the overall quality of life is down into the low 80s, and the excellent rating has dropped to about 12%. So the shift is, you do not have the shift that other communities have from going from good to only fair. Your folks are staying in the good category, and the excellent rating is more than 2.5 times the norm right now across the metro area. 2 open-ended questions. What do they like most about living in the city? The convenient location, neighborhood and housing, close to family, safe, friendly people, close to job, schools, quiet and peaceful. You do have a split, and you've always had a split here. You're a first-ring suburb, but you do have about half the population that's reacting to small-town attributes, whether it's being close to their family, the friendly people, the quiet and peaceful nature. So that still exists. It's not just your typical burb. You've never been your typical burb where it's all about location and I'm close to my job. Now, if we ask what they like most, we always follow up with what's the most serious issue facing the community. This is flipped. Crime has come down now from the 2024, and we're seeing that. But high taxes. This is the issue of the 2026 election. So as a top of the mind response, 1 in 4 are saying high taxes. Rising crime dropped to 17%. Reckless driving and speeding. That's another metro area issue. Doesn't matter if we're in the southwest, northwest, the north, it is an issue across. The aging population, 1 in 10, and then everything else falls to single digits. Excuse me. Down at the bottom, the nothings. Once again, going in line with people being unhappy. The 14% would have been the norm before the pandemic. Now it's double the norm. Because people have found more things to be unhappy about. So you still do have 1 in 7 folks that see no problems in the community. It is utopia here. What's the direction of the city? A little bit of a shift, but it's now more in line with what we're seeing across the metro area. The norm for right direction right now is down to 70%. The wrong track is at 25%. So you do have an uptick here. We follow up with the wrong track. And now keep in mind, this is 19%. It's basically 78 people. And we ask, what's causing the city to go off on the wrong track? 39%. So it is 5% of the community talk about rising crime and then high taxes. What's the sense of community identity? Now, this is actually a little bit counter. Last time, you were at 86%, you're at 90%, but your excellent rating went up to 34%. So this is counter because we're losing connection also. We're not gathering as much as the community events, attendance is down, coming to meetings is down, those sorts of aspects. So you do have, you've actually recovered the sense of community to before the pandemic. What do folks have the closest connection to? This is the suburbs in a nutshell. And it's always been. This is my 33rd year of doing public opinion research. The city of being the closest connection to the city, when I started in 1994, that would be about 40%. And we've seen the city go down, and then we saw neighborhoods come up. What's happened now is a neighborhood has come up, and it's now the social connections, whether it's through church, the school district, the workplace, or family and friends. Do they feel welcome in the community? Absolutely. They could say very somewhat, not to, or not at all. You actually have the majority, 56% saying the most positive. They feel very welcome in the community. We added 3 questions on Roseville's vision and asked, do they strongly agree, disagree, or are they unsure that Roseville is achieving these vision statements? There was very little disagreement, so I decided to split the strong agree, the intensity, to the soft agree. On creating a vibrant community for all residents, 91%. On creating a safe community, 94%, with 53% indicating that's the case, and an inclusive community, 90%, with a flat majority saying they strongly agree with that statement.
And just once again, this is the rating of how well the city is achieving?
Achieving the
Okay.
mission, yes.
Not just that they think it's a good thing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Couple of philosophical questions. When they think about quality of life, what is the most important indicator or aspect that goes into their value, the value proposition they're making? It's the sense of community, which we saw was very strong, in public safety. 53% point to 2 items. Then upkeep, quiet and peaceful, good schools, open space and nature, park and recreation, retail services, and the upkeep of housing. But those 2 dominate the list. This varies from community to community, and one of the biggest variables in it is the schools. And it depends on the percent of the population that has children. What is a city aspect that needs to be fixed or improved? More jobs, 1 in 5. That's kind of across the board. It's across the state. More affordable housing. We're going to talk about some housing characteristics in a little bit. More sidewalks, and then more public transit. If you go down to the bottom, just under 1 in 5 indicate, going back to the 14% that see there's no serious issue, there's nothing that needs to be fixed in the city of Roseville. When they think about a high quality of life, what's most important and second most important? This one, the low crime rate, a good school system, the sense of community, and then everything else falls from those top two. Turning to city park and recreation facilities, it's always been a jewel of Roseville. Going back all the years I've surveyed here, 94% rate the city park and recreations facilities positively. Only 6% say only fair. Nobody said poor, and just short of a third rated them as excellent. What facility does their household use the most? You have been pretty consistent now. 1 in 5 say they don't use, very specific demographic over the age of 65. And then it's just kind of a jockeying between trails and neighborhood parks, with athletic fields about 1 in 10 based on the presence of a child in the household. Upkeep and maintenance, 93% favorable. Stable to where it was in 2024. Only 7% said only fair, and nobody said poor. It remains a crown jewel. Participation in city programs is actually fairly high if we look at communities with similar demographics. With 38%, that actually I think went up about 4 points from the last survey. But we follow up with those that say yes, and ask how do you rate your experience? 94% satisfaction. So you're never going to get to 100% satisfaction on everything. You're plus or minus 5%, that gets you to 99%. How often does the household use city trails? It falls into basically thirds. 33% are using it on a weekly or more often basis. 35% on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. And then you have 35% that are quarterly or less often. Only 17% indicate that they do not use the trails at all. When they think of a priority for the trail and sidewalk system, what should the city focus on? This is what you call, a pollster comes in and says you have a statistical tie. Plus or minus 5%, they're all important. So connecting neighborhoods and parks leads the list at 32%, connecting neighborhoods and businesses, 27%, and creating trails and parks for exercise at 24%. We've looked at the use of public buildings in the parks, and it's been very stable. It has just been in the low 30s to high 30s. This time around, we're at 38%. Do the facilities, the park and recreation facilities, meet the needs of their household? Yes, 90%. Now, with this one, I always say there is a lack of imagination to the response on this, because what they don't know they don't have, they might want. Helping Apple Valley with the park bond a few years ago, they had about 90% saying, yeah, it meets the needs. But then how about all of these things? And it passed overwhelmingly. So they're content right now at this point in time with park and recreation facilities. Turning over to city services. First off, we want to see a sea of blue instead of a red riptide, and that's what we do have across the board. The police protection, fire protection, and emergency medical, the public safety sector, right at the top of the range. 98, 95, and 91. Sewer and water, 87%. Drainage and flood control, I always say that one can vary from one rainstorm or a bad snow season can impact that. Building inspection, 79. Animal control, 86. Code enforcement, extraordinarily high at 83% right now. We have questions going later in the survey because code enforcement is one thing that's picked up post-pandemic. Like I said, people are around, they see more things in their neighborhood. And then we get down to the public works. And this is pretty consistent now over the past couple years. There has been a drop across the metro area on public works, but your street repair and maintenance is still, the current norm on this is 60-40. So you're still at 69% favorable. Snow plowing, that always depends on the snow from the previous year and what's remembered, what mailbox was hit, and those sorts of things. But overall, a very strong evaluation of city services. I mentioned early on when we looked at the most serious issue as a top of the mind response, high property taxes was at 23%. So we follow up with folks and we ask when they think about their city share of property taxes, do they think they're very high, somewhat high, about average, low, or unsure? In 2024, 46% said high. This time, 52% said high. So it is a statistically significant increase. But what we're finding in 2026, the statewide I shared with Mama earlier this year, we're going to be doing another statewide this, next month in August, that I'll be sharing with groups in the fall. The perception of people saying their taxes are high, right? Property taxes are high in the metro area right now is up to 62%. There are communities in the western suburbs that are approaching 80% in that category. So while you do have an increase, it is not the increase that we've seen in other areas across the community, across the Twin Cities, and you actually have 1% that said low.
Just back on that, your reference to who you presented to earlier this year, that's the
City Managers Association.
City managers.
It's not your mother.
No.
Okay, got it.
Metropolitan Area Managers Association.
That's what it is. Okay, got it.
Oh my gosh, I used an acronym. I always tell clients don't use acronyms. I apologize,
That's
Mr. Mayor.
totally all right, but I just had to believe there might be some
There
people
might be
that were
someone
at
when I
home going,
presented
"Did
to
I hear
Mama."
that right?"
Yeah.
And maybe you did share it with your mom too.
She's not interested. Would they support a property tax increase to maintain city services? You do have an increase. You now have 61%. You've been unique, and I mentioned it in 2024 also. What we saw this in the recession 2008, 2009, and we've seen it coming out of the pandemic and with inflation. People understand that it costs more to provide the same thing, whether it's a loaf of bread, city services, school, education. So on this one, the tax increase to maintain the norm right now is about 75%. So you're a little bit low on that in comparison. It's going up, but we're folks, we now have just bifurcated like we did 20 years ago with the recession. You have 75% that support a property tax increase to maintain. You have 75% that oppose a property tax increase to enhance or improve. So what folks are saying, I will pay more for what I have at this point in time. I'm not interested in enhancing. So they'll have a majority now, and it's gone up. Go back to 2018. That's almost doubled on the support. So where the rubber hits the road, when you consider the value of city services and the property taxes you pay, how do you rate that value? 80% rate it favorably right now. This has gone down now to 70%. Because there's two inputs that go in. City services, which are strong, but my concern on property tax is what I'm paying. And that has dropped the value proposition for folks across the state of Minnesota. So they might think you have an increase in those saying the property taxes are high, but strong city services will bring up the perception of the value that they're getting for the taxes being paid. Have city services evolved with the needs of residents? Yes, that is a new question. 88% say that you have evolved. Only 7% said no. Would they support investment in infrastructure, these infrastructure projects? Now keep in mind, you do have the property tax issue, but this shows you they are willing to put their money towards things. And part of it is, if we saw earlier in most serious issue, there was a concern on aging infrastructure. So this time, water and sewer pipes, 92%. City buildings, 75%. Pedestrian pathways, 84%. Bikeways, 76%. City roads, 96%. Sustainability and environmental projects, that was new to the battery, at 86%. So there is strong support for investment in these types of infrastructure. Another new question, how well does the transportation system allow you to go where needed? For a first-ring suburb, this is remarkable. 92%. You get out to the third ring, and you might get 80%, but in the first ring suburbs, it's about a 55-45 proposition. So people do feel that they can get where they need to go in the city of Roseville. The sense of empowerment question. Do they feel that they can have a say about the way city runs things? Well, you do have a 9-point drop, but you don't have a statistically significant increase in the no because of the unsure went up 3 points. You need a shift of more than 6% in order to go with the margin of error and do the comparative. So we're down from 2020, kind of right in between. The norm on this right now is about 60 to 35. So in line with what we're seeing. The rating of the mayor and city council, 87% positive, 10% disapproval, almost a 9-to-1. Right now in the metro area, the last survey that we did was 7-to-1 ratio. So very strong. Similarly, the city staff, 93-7. And you can see when you look at them together, they're very similar ratings. The community aren't differentiating between the governance and the administration. You can always I always know I'm going into a dysfunctional city where the mayor and council are here and the administration's here, or vice versa. This is a hand in the glove. They see you as one entity. The appearance of Roseville is it excellent, good, or only fair or poor? 92%. Positive, a 5-point increase, 26% rating it excellent, still single digits. And this has been very consistent over the last 8 years, as you can see. Has the appearance improved, declined, or about the same? Better than 3-to-1, saying the appearance has improved versus declined. I mentioned earlier that code enforcement was very high. When we asked specifically, how do you rate the city on the enforcement of nuisance codes? 83-15. Very few communities go under a third in the only fair or poor category. Because if you whether it's weeds or junk cars or what have you, there's always one thing. This is pretty much across the board that you are meeting the needs of the community at the right point when it comes to nuisance code enforcement. Public safety concern, it is the concern, and it's traffic speeding 25, throw in the reckless driving at 6%. Just under a third are pointing to that as the main public safety concern. All other things pale in comparison. And as when we ask this question across the metro, it doesn't matter. It is the reckless driving, speeding that is the concern. The amount of neighborhood patrolling in their neighborhood, well, 70% say about right. 25% say not enough. That's unchanged from 2024. We have the post 2020, everything that's happened. That bump saying not enough. And the too much always make me chuckle because they say all sorts of things on why they think there's too much neighborhood patrolling. Basically, they got ticketed for something. Turning to city characteristics. This is set up like a stoplight. Red, stop, we have enough. Green, not enough, bring more in. Yellow, about the right amount. And we've seen a pretty consistent trend. And it's a pretty consistent trend across communities with very high quality of life ratings that people really like living in. And it is the life cycle housing concern. So I always say, look at it, the difference between the green versus the red. So by 48%, people are indicating there's not enough affordable rental units. By 29%, not enough market rate. 12% condos, 19% townhouses, 35% affordable owner-occupied housing. Move-up housing tips a little bit more to too much, and then higher cost housing, it's actually negative 23 the other way. And then assisted living, 36% the other way. So their concern, and as a resident ages in a community, and if they enjoy living in the community, they've been here a long time, they have the concerns about, is there a place for my child to come back to this community? And then is there a place for me to land if I need to move out, if I need assisted living? On the amenities side, whether it's open parks and open trails, trails and bikeways, service, retail, entertainment, and dining. Tips a little bit towards too much, but it's basically a statistical tie that you're just at about the right amount of those sorts of things. 4 new questions. We asked if, for housing challenges. Is this a major issue, minor issue, or not an issue at all? Keep in mind on that earlier question on financially stressed, was just simply ask folks about their income and their expenses and how they're matching up. You had 40% indicating they were financially stressed. So is mortgage or rent a challenge? 41% said a major, 25% a minor challenge. Maintenance and upkeep of their property, 21 with a overall issue for 54%. Home or rental insurance, 12% major issue, 55% at least an issue, and the physical accessibility under 30%. So I think coupling this with the next question, because we asked folks, are they aware of housing programs to help with foreclosure, to help with home improvement? 41% said yes, and it's been pretty consistent. 57% say no. It would be an opportunity to try to push those programs, when especially you see the folks saying that they are especially concerned about their mortgage or their rent. 82% indicate that they participated in curbside recycling program. 74% say they do it every 2 weeks. Now, recycling and voting is something you don't want to tell a stranger you don't do. So there's always, this is a halo question. There's always a little bit of a, you're going to fudge the numbers. Supposedly 60% are recycling every 2 weeks in the community. Would they support going to every week for collection for an additional fee? The community splits right down the middle. 49% support, 47% opposed. Strong support, strong opposition. They don't feel strongly that way, but it's an even tie. Do they support city-managed trash collection? No. 37% support, 45% oppose. Once again, it does not have the intensity that it has in other communities. You have single digits in both categories, and then you have 18% saying no. So with the margin of error, it's your pollster's nightmare, 40-40-20. And this is, I think I have one community in the last 5 years that actually got to 51% support. In Minnesota, this is mom, apple pie, and the right to choose your garbage hauler for some folks. And so it's where we're at, and we've been for the last 20 years. Are they aware of the drop-off site for food and scrap organics? 61% indicate that they are. Have they used it? 43% of the 61% indicate that they have not. So you have about 33% of the community indicating that they're using it sometimes. We followed up with it said that with those that said no, they were not aware of it. Now that they are aware of it, how likely are they to use it? 4% said they're very likely. So it's less than 2% to actually translate over. And then just, this is the whole population now. What's the likelihood of participating in a curbside compostable waste collection program? 18% said very likely, 34% said somewhat likely. This one, standard marketing projection, because there's a difference from intention to behavior. How often, how big's the cart, all of those things come into play. You take half of the very likely and a quarter of the somewhat likely. It's a conservative estimate. But with that, you'd have about 16% of the community that would translate over. And this, it doesn't matter where we are in the metro area, it tends to be in this 15 to 25% range that will actually follow through and participate in an organics collection program. And then finally, communications. It was 87%. It remains 87%. Norm on this right now is 72%. It's dropped. A lot of cities, for cost-saving purposes, have shifted how they're communicating with the public. And the public has seen that and reacted to it. part of the reason for the high rating is if you look at the top two, you have a majority of folks that are relying on the city for their communication. A strong newsletter and a strong website help insulate. There are many communities right now and school districts as they have moved away, especially from sorts of mailings and newsletters. What has happened, older folks who read the newspaper or read the newsletter, they're not going to go to social media. They're not going to go to the website. And so there are suburban communities now that the number one source of information is the grapevine, because that's where folks are going to go. That's not the case here with the city, the public relying on the city for information. Now, how do they prefer to receive information? This one, I always say, look at print versus electronic. Do you want to hold something in your hands? Publications and newsletters, mailings to home, local weekly newspapers, 52%. Do they want to push a button? 16% website, 13% email, 11% Facebook, 3% other social media. So just over a third. So the community, and it very much tracks, the defining factor here is, do you have a child? And then the age split being 55 and older. So it tips more. So you're meeting the community in the way that they want to be met when it comes to communication, which results in high communication evaluations. 69% recall receiving Roseville City News. 86% read Roseville City News. So the reach of Roseville City News, just over 60% of the community. How do those that read it rate its effectiveness? Overwhelmingly effective. Just short of 90% saying at least somewhat effective, and just short of a majority saying very effective.
Is it unusual that more people would say they've read it than remember receiving it? Does that mean they're reading it in other places, like the library or something? Or?
No, the receipt. Well, no. So the 69% are asked, "Do you read it?"
Okay.
So
I
the
see that
31% that say don't read it are not asked, "Do you read it?" Don't. The 31% that say don't recall receiving
So
it.
the second category is a portion of the top.
Correct.
Exactly. Got it. Okay.
Correct.
That's
Yep.
Yeah, that
So we
makes-
go down. The first one is receive goes into do you read? Read goes in how effective is
Got
it?
it. Thank you for
Yep.
clarifying that.
And then finally, social media. First off, do they use it? So each bar doesn't add to 100 because not everybody uses. And then if they do use, are you likely to use it to get information from the city? Email, 78%. 66% say they're likely to get it from the city. Now, what we found with email, though, is it's becoming the new junk mail. As people start just deleting everything and getting, it's easier actually to get mailings in the hands of people now. I think 20 years ago, you just go to the mailbox and just throw out everything in the recycling bin. Now people just get to their office and mass delete everything, and so it's hard for emails to get through. Facebook follows at 65%, the city website at 60%. Then we go YouTube, Nextdoor, Instagram, X, Twitter, and then other social media. But the social media has grown. And I'm actually going to be exploring it in next month's statewide that I'll be sharing with the groups. We have more people now willing to say that they rely on social media than ever. In some communities, it's tripled. It used to be one, like I joked about the recycling and voting. You don't tell somebody you didn't vote. You don't tell somebody you don't recycle. And you don't tell somebody you rely on social media. We all do, but you don't tell somebody you do. People are more willing now than ever to make that be the case. So we're going to be exploring more and how it's changing on how people interact. So I would say, just in closing, across the board, very strong, very stable in a time of, the last 6 years of remarkable turbulence. And you have recovered even some of the to where you were pre-pandemic, which is a unique position to be as a city. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
All right. Thank you again for the presentation and doing the survey for Roseville. Questions from the council? All right. I think you've covered it pretty well. We will provide an opportunity for public comment as well, so if you want to have a seat in the audience and relax a moment, and we'll see if there's anybody from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening. It does not appear to be the case, so thank you again for the presentation and all the work, and certainly we'll be, all of our analysts will be poring over the numbers as we go forward here as a city, but we haven't done this for a little longer than usual in between surveys, so we do like the opportunity to see what's changed, so thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Right, that then brings us to, we've got guests from Ramsey County here to make a presentation about County Road C, but I think we may have, since we're approaching our normal break time of 8 o'clock, we may have a request for a 5-minute break, so we'll do that before the presentation from Ramsey County.
But yeah, the 3.5% is.
We're back from a short break here to continue with our agenda this evening. Once again, next on our agenda is to receive a presentation from Ramsey County in relation to the proposed pathway on Victoria Street, north of County Road C. And we have our City Public Works Director, Jesse Fryhammer, this evening to make introductions and then let the Ramsey County folks take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before the county and their consultant come up, just want to give a real quick background on Victoria Street since we've had a lot of discussion on this in the past. So just real quickly, this pathway is on the city's pathway master plan. It currently is segment 10 if you follow the maps. It's currently ranked 15th, but of that, this is the highest actually ranked path on an arterial that doesn't have a pathway. So which is kind of reflected in why back in 2016, we did get a petition for this. I've been here for 11 years, and this has probably been our most requested pathway in the city, mainly because it's on a county road next to a lake and stuff like that. So, but with that, the council did approve supporting funding, applying for Safe Roads to School funding back in 2023. The county didn't get that funding, but as part of this project, they'll also be looking for applying for that funding as well. But just kind of want to give a little bit of background since this has been in front of the council in the past. But with that, I will turn it over to Ramsey County and their consultant to kind of give an update on where the project's at, kind of where it's going. So with that, I will turn it over to Joey and Gus to give a presentation.
All right, thank you. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having us. My name is Gus Perrin. I'm the consultant project manager from WSB representing Ramsey County. With me here, I have Joey Lundquist.
Joey Lundquist. I'm a project manager for Ramsey County.
Welcome.
So just wanted to explain a little bit more about the project. The intent of this project is to add a shared use path or a trail along the west side of Victoria Street from County Road C here in Roseville into Shoreview, where it'll end at Harriet Avenue. It's about a 2-mile long segment, including the Shoreview segment. The roadway will also be resurfaced and preserved with this project. There will be some narrowing of lanes. There will be some drainage improvements that will cause a little bit more construction than your average just resurfacing in order to accommodate the additional facilities. And as you can see on the map there, that we are just to the west of Lake Owasso and to the east of Lake Josephine. A little more on our project timeline. This is the second phase of our project. Jesse had mentioned that we'd previously evaluated this project in a study that occurred back in 2021, 2022, and was finalized since then. There's been funding sources identified, and now we've moved into phase 2, where we're going to approach final design. The kickoff has already happened this winter and spring. We selected a preferred alternative from that original study. And we've actually met with the public. We had an open house at the Roseville Skating Center back in May. And where you'll find us right now is we're moving into final design. So I'll just take a look forward here. During the study, which was phase 1, we met with the public a few times, and that shaped how we're designing the project in phase 2. Which you can see on some of these slides. There was support for improved safety for traffic and pedestrians, and then consistent interest in adding that separated facility. Vehicle speeds being a concern, as you probably just heard in that previous presentation, and limited comfort for people walking and biking, as right now the condition, there's not much of a shoulder along this busy roadway. And then there's just a need for better connections to schools, parks, in the neighborhood. I believe this corridor serves about 3 schools between Roseville and Shoreview. So pretty populated that way. And then now what we're going to be doing in phase 2, we've identified a trail concept that'll separate pedestrians and bicyclists from the roadway and placing it on the west side to reduce as many. It's not eliminating, but it'll reduce the number of required crossings to reach some of these destinations. We heard some of the feedback, and based on some of the impacts, decided that the west side was also less impactful for some weighted options that were in the study, and that's published on the county's website and can be reviewed at any time. And the project boundaries were updated to match community guidance, and trail improvements are going to be paired with traffic calming and other safety improvements that'll result in a more safe corridor for all users. As I mentioned, we did host an open house here for the city of Roseville at the skating center. That was on May 20th from 5 to 7. We had 64 people attend. It was a pretty noisy room. There was a lot of people there. And we got a lot of questions about the project related to drainage, curb impacts, the trail width, the landscaping in front of people's homes, and pedestrian safety. And the attendees got to speak with engineers like myself and Joey, as well as some planners that we had with us. And I think we had somebody else there from the city of Shoreview that was representing as well. So they got to talk to us and just ask questions. We informed them of what had happened in the process before and where we were going. That was the first of 4 open houses, and we'll also have 2 pop-up events before the end of final design. And we plan to target one of those in Roseville again. So one of those pop-ups, just to clarify. And at this most recent open house feedback, what we heard was very similar to what we'd heard in phase 1. The vision of the project, they really want to work on the safety and creating that separation. One of the things that we heard a lot too was maintaining privacy, and I think that's related to potential impacts to the vegetation that currently exists in front of people's homes, that and a pedestrian facility that will be closer to their home now on the public right-of-way than the roadway is today. But they also expressed that they really want to be hearing from the project team as they move forward, so communication, and then balance the connectivity with the actual needs of the project. The issues, once again, are very much in line with the vision. Traffic calming, so looking at speeds, potential impacts to private properties, drainage and stormwater concerns, safety and considerations for specific populations and their own design preferences. And then the sentiment, there is a strong support in the community to add a separated trail. There was some concerns and people that are ultimately opposed to the project. So it's mixed overall, but we do feel it's generally very positive, and as Jesse mentioned, has been requested by petition. Are there any questions about our project?
No. Oh, well, I shouldn't say no. None from other members of the council. Questions? All right. Doesn't appear to be the case.
I think probably looking back at the schedule, one more thing worth mentioning, construction will be in 2028. So we are still a ways away, and design will be occurring from now through the fall of next year. So there will be more opportunities to hear and learn about the project if you're interested.
Right. And in terms of questions too, I think I was thinking about, so was the west side what was looked at during, or primarily during the study, or was it the east side, or was it sort of a switch at some point over the course of the pathway? I'm trying to remember from 2021.
The study is on the website, and it indicated that they preferred the west side. They have a lot of tables in the study report, and I think it was just a preference that there was a lot more positive impact if it was on the west side. And we decided not to open it up again, so we went with their recommendation.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Are there other questions from the members of the council? All right. I should check if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to the project. Once again, our requested action is to receive the report and the presentation and provide any feedback. Certainly, the project is moving through its various steps at the county, and so this is an opportunity for input. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to the project this evening? Does not appear to be the case. This is going to be a quick cameo appearance by Ramsey County tonight. Well, we do appreciate the updates, and I know this is a pathway that I've heard from people in the community that they're very interested in, and so looking forward to the next phases of the project. And I think I can speak for the council and the community in terms of appreciating all of the outreach that the county has been doing more of on all of the county projects, especially in Roseville, but specifically on this project. I know that in earlier iterations of consideration of this, there were certainly a lot of interest generated by some folks in the neighborhood, both in Shoreview and in Roseville. And so it may be a testament to the work that everybody's done in terms of outreach that we don't have. Apparently, those folks here this evening to express the concerns that were brought forward at that time. So thank you again for that and for bringing this back before us for our feedback this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
All right,
Thank
thanks. All right, the next thing we have, this is sort of a public works evening for the council here this evening. We have a joint meeting with the Public Works, Environment, and Transportation Commission, and we're going to populate the table with some commissioners and some name tags for all of them. Right now, I believe we have the overhead microphone system on as well, so we may not have to pass the mics back and forth necessarily for pickup for the audience, but we'll see how this goes. Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you to make introductions and kick off the discussion.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. Good to be back here. Thanks for having us and just allowing us to talk a little bit more about the past year, where we're going, what we're doing. Having done this a few years in a row now, if you remember from other ones, I like to go a little bit beyond, what's in the packet of just I'll call it the dull and dried. Here's the list of what we've done and a few things we're thinking about. And so what I asked members this year was what was their favorite moment? You can tell by the list, we've talked about a lot of things. A lot of things have gone on in the last year, obviously. And so for both the I'll call us the seasoned members up here, the three of us who have been here a while, what was your favorite moment? But also we have a couple newcomers as well. And so in that short time, just asking for them what that favorite moment is. So with that brief introduction, let's just start over there. Go ahead and introduce yourself. And then if you want to dive into my question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dan Fergus. I've been on the commission for probably getting close to 3 years, I'm guessing. Thinking about my favorite moment over the last year related to being on the PWET commission, my favorite moment actually isn't directly related to our work, but I think it's relevant. During Metro Surge, I was involved in a lot of news-related observing and stuff, and during our January meeting, preparing, I was not very excited to come talk about New England Relay and such, but I did my best, and I showed up, and I, was there, and Chair and Vice Chair Pisak and Hodder prepared a statement that they started the thing with, and it was very powerful, and it meant a whole lot to me, and it reinvigorated for me, or re-demonstrated for me what I love about our community. I love working with my fellow commission members. We don't always agree, but by and large we do, and I don't know, it just showed me what a great community we are here. And I've seen it from comments that you all have made at various times as well. But that was my sort of favorite PWET moment.
My name is Luke Sandstrom. I'm one of the newer members. I don't have a wealth of experience to pull from a couple of months in, but one of the first meetings I attended, we talked about the Pathway Master Plan. And it was really cool for me, one, because when I was on staff at the city, at the 2021 update, I actually worked on it, so it's cool to be on the other side of it, looking at it. But two, to just see the progress that has been made in the last couple of years since I actually worked on it as a staff person. I've worked in public sector long enough that I know a lot of people, a lot of places create master plans, then they go on shelves, they collect dust, and nobody finds them until spring cleaning comes around. And so it's cool to see this as a living document, to see the momentum, the progress that has been made, but also the progress going forward, what we're planning. And so that's a testament to city council and staff's resilience on it, and it's just been a really cool thing to see in the short time. I'm excited to see what happens going forward.
Pass over me.
Well, I think for me, my name is Ed Hodder. I've been on the PWET committee for, I guess, almost 3 years, I guess, myself, actually. It's been a while. I think one of my favorite sessions of the commission, I like the sustainability updates that we receive, and climate equity plan that the city staff has been working on. It's been a very impressive piece of work, and to see all those pieces come together, that's very exciting, and it's just a great job that the team has done, and direction from the council also. It's been very impressive with what's been done in the city and what we've have achieved together.
Hello, my name is Charles Tedder. I'm also one of the newer council members. And aside from the moment of getting the kind of rapid entry into the council, which I appreciate, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to serve. In the few meetings I've been at, the opportunity to learn the work of the city, the work of the public works staff. I want to echo my colleague. The sustainability materials we received recently were especially impressive, including some of the educational pieces they had to go out to the community members. I remember us talking about how we ourselves, would be going home and taking some of those with us. It's an impressive set of things that Roseville has going on, lots of moving pieces. And every month, every meeting I come to, I'm more and more impressed with all the good things that are happening.
So then back to me, because I don't think I introduced myself either. Brian Fisek, current chair of the commission. As I thought about the last year, and really it kind of goes back beyond the last year for me, just my time on this commission, it comes into the connections and discussions we've had. So this has been an opportunity for me to get to know people. Going back to the survey, they're outside my neighborhood, still within the city, but people I don't think I would have ordinarily met. And so through that, it's been good to get to know my fellow commissioners, but also then that leads into the discussions we've had. And for the most part, I think we do a fairly good job of discussing, coming to a consensus where we need to vote on things or where we need to provide recommendations. There are a couple instances where we have not. The LEAF discussion, which you'll be getting to later, that is one we had a split discussion on, or split vote, and made a recommendation, but very much split almost down the middle. And the discussion we had was fantastic. Lots of different points of view. I myself, as an engineer, have definitely a certain way I think about things, so I really appreciate hearing that difference of opinion, different perspective, different experience that we're all bringing to the table, and just hearing that come out and knowing that we were able to disagree, we are able to have a different split vote and still go to the next one and come together again and go, all right, let's move on and proceed forward. So that has been fantastic from my view, just being able to be a part of and lead this group through those discussions. And so with that, I'll stop briefly if there's any comments or questions on that, and then we can get into some of the work plan items.
Comments or questions from council? I think it was an impressive list that you all came up with of things that you're, felt good about in the last year, especially given that the first one was such a high bar set for everybody else to have. So well done to all of you. So thanks, and I think looking forward to the rest of the conversation that we'll have.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and start with I'm going to kind of bypass over. We have the list of bullet points from the activities, accomplishments. If we want to talk about any of those from the past year, I'm happy to entertain those. But I was more looking forward to work plan items for the upcoming year. We have a couple listed in the packet there. Pavement management, future funding, continue with the pathway master plan updates, assessment policy. What is not on there, what I want to add to the list is the safe systems approach, which is a initiative from MnDOT, thinking about how they evaluate the transportation system. And I'll just briefly say it's thinking about it more like pieces of Swiss cheese, where you want to get the vehicle, the environment, like the roadway, and even the after crash experience. You get all those components, much like a piece of Swiss cheese. If any one of them fails, you're only going through one slice. It takes a whole lot of things to go I'll say wrong in this case, for a crash to happen or for a life to be lost. And so I thought that would be something worthwhile to present to the group and bring to staff as well. So we have those four. I'll turn it back to my fellow members if there was anything else they wanted to add to that brief list that we're looking at. In addition to some regular items we have our sustainability super meeting every January, some standard ones that appear year after year. Comments?
It has come up several times about the garbage hauling, and I don't know if that's further down your, okay. All right.
That was going to be on topics. I just wanted to mention the first ones here. But good segue. Go ahead and introduce it for us then.
I think there are a number of members of the commission that are interested in at least entertaining a single garbage hauler. And I know that's something that a lot of people in the community aren't a fan of, and we need to figure out how to go about it and whether to go about it. But it's something I'd love to be able to discuss as the commission.
So that is one topic we have on there. The other one is speed limits, which we talked about a couple years ago. We did not get to it in this current one, but looking for a little more direction on where you would like us to take that in terms of a citywide speed limit. Should we be looking heavily into cost? Do we need to look more just the comparison to other cities, what's happened, just like a little more direction on what you might expect from us on that one. And then, again, open it up to our members. Those were the two that definitely came forward from our discussions.
Well, thinking about speed limits is just, like traffic calming, like some of the earlier comments were about, like on Victoria along certain segways, and just general overall guidance.
So I think at this point, turn it into that discussion, anything on those two items, but also anything else from the council that you would like to see from us as we start to set our plan for the next year.
All right. Well, I think these are topics the council may be interested in diving into with you. So I'll turn it over to Councilmember Strawn, who had her hand up first.
Yes, I was the one who mentioned the speed limits. So I think what we realized at that time, and maybe has been one of the deterrents, is the amount of state and county roads in addition to city roads we have here. And so I think Mr. Freihammer or our city engineers probably have a better sense of whether that is because some of the roads you don't realize are that are a state or county road are kind of in the midst of other roads that seem like they're just city roads. So I think if there was some interest, maybe just even making looking at a map and seeing if that was even possible. It was in response to Lauderdale and Falcon Heights and St. Paul making that change about the time, people's concerns about speeding. However, I would think a lot of people would argue that the racing on 280 and 36 are louder and more, or Snelling are more obnoxious than citywide speeding. But I think that was the, kind of looking at all of that and finding if there was any environmental impact. I think if you're on the road and you don't have an electric car, I don't know that you're increasing the impact on the environment. But as we have all these really bad air days, it probably is good to know if that speed limit or other things are impacting it. I don't know that after speaking with Mr. Freihammer that we have so many different so many different ownerships of roads that it's not quite as cut and dried as some other areas. So I think it would be interesting to discuss, but I also don't know the practicality of it because of the many different sections of our city that are encompassed. I did make a list of a few other things that I thought would be of value. I realized recently when I was traveling outside of Roseville that we still, we don't charge for plastic bags, or we have never discussed whether or not we should do some type of bag policy. And so I don't know if that's ever been discussed as a as a group, or what kind of impact that does have. But in the spring, there's a lot of plastic bags around. That's probably one of the biggest things. I would think that there would be opportunities as we get closer on the maintenance facility, that there may be some opportunities for input or other ideas, but I'm not sure it may be past that point. I noticed you said something about a noise ordinance, although I don't know that we ever heard any specific recommendations about potential changes to that was brought to us as a council. So that would be interesting to hear about that. I thought the safe systems sound interesting. I think if you have specific actions along the climate equity that keep moving our city forward, Ms. Bakken is amazing, but she is just one person, and she's trying to do everything. So you are our conduit to the community. So if there was a way that you knew of to kind of roll out some of the plans, the composting, curbside composting, or other things like that, if you had kind of communication ideas of how we could better have involvement and investment in those type of programs, I think that'd be really helpful. I'm always an advocate for bike plans, but even maybe low-cost bike plans, maybe just marking a street, the bike roads in Minneapolis are just, they haven't reconfigured the road itself, but they've painted it. Maybe maybe there's a way to connect some of the parks with some street painting that doesn't involve a major curb cut or other things like that, but a way for people to drive people from one neighborhood facility and park, kind of, I see that more as a infrastructure piece. Let's see. And then I think just, along the, I would support investigating the single hauler. We haven't talked about it in a while. I think there is some interest. Then there's some that are very, very opposed. I think it would be good to know in this time what advantages we would have, or what financial or environmental impacts we might achieve by having that, because I think we have to look at it bigger than it's just one truck, but instead of 12. I think we need to be realistic about what would we expect? Would it be one section of the city has this hauler, one has this hauler, or how do we section it out? I know that Councilmember Groff mentioned this right after I was elected, and I think it would be helpful to hear. Maplewood's been doing this for 20 years. Then there have been some false starts from some of our neighbors. I don't know that we're ready to go there, but it would be interesting to know what the thinking is on it in communities that are moving toward it, and why it has been of interest and successful in that conversion, and if that would be something that would be palatable, attractive, and practical in our environment. And then just making sure that if we are doing climate things, that it says how much are you willing to pay to have sustainability, and 86% said they would. And I think just continuing to give us opportunities to hear about the latest and greatest. Some of you do other things in your day jobs that maybe you're hearing some of the best practices elsewhere. So just keeping those ideas at the forefront for us. Thanks.
Other council feedback, questions, or comments? Councilmember Groff.
So on the speed limit, as Councilmember Strawn said, so many of our roads are state or county, and I found the complaints I get on the speeding are on those roads. They aren't usually on the side streets as much, so I don't know that that's the most effective way to try to limit our speed there. However, I will say that, as Commissioner Sandstrom knows, in our neighborhood, when they narrowed what was County Road B, that has slowed the traffic, because that was kind of a straight line shot. And I did have a couple of neighbors say, "Why did you narrow it?" And I said, "Because we want to have people drive slower." And they said, "Yeah, we do drive slower because now people have their garbage cans and things setting, you're aware that the space is narrower and you're being a little more careful." So I think some of the things like that could be something we could look at to slow the speeds down. garbage hauling, I did a lot of research on that some years ago, and did not go through. The case that I found was the most impressive was Richfield, and they did implement it, but they took a year to study it, or a year and a half, and they on a voluntary basis had residents bring in their bills, and then they compared the bills with different households and what the size of the container was and who the carriers were, and then they did a spreadsheet on that, and it showed that people on the same block with the same size container, some were paying twice as much as the other person, just if they knew enough to call every year. And it was quite typically someone who had not been handling that, and their spouse had died, and they didn't realize you have to call every year, otherwise your garbage costs go up. So there is data out there to verify that. However, having said that, in Roseville, as you can see in the survey that we just received, it is a very split thing. So any of these things we're going to do would have a huge part of educating the community about it and all those things, because as Mr. Leatherman said, some people are very attached to their ability to choose their hauler. Plastic bags, I'd be interested in looking at that. I mean, we do want to reduce plastics, and other cities have implemented that, so I don't know. I think we put that on hold a little bit during COVID because everything was so, costly for the restaurants, but now we're sort of moving ahead with those, so I think that would be something to look at. I would be very interested in reducing the noise from Highway 36 because I hear the motorcycles quite a bit, and I know people on Snelling and so on, but I don't know. You'd need to talk to the police department some about that too, what the reality of that would be.
And perhaps MnDOT.
And MnDOT and implementation, and
And the State Patrol.
That's about all I had. Thanks.
Right. Councilmember Bauer.
Yeah, I'm not much more to add on the speed limit. One thing I would question is we could set a speed limit, but the enforcement is a big part of it as well. And how much we do of that. On your pavement management and future funding, I think that is a fantastic thing to look at. I would while doing that, also take a look at I'd be interested if you're doing that to also look at our water mains and going through the city as well. I believe we're, pretty well caught up and it's tracking, but as far as that, I think that might, I'd be interested in a ordering such that takes that into account. There might be some aging water mains under certain roads that would cause us to want to prioritize certain things ahead of others. So in your evaluation of doing that, maybe work with staff and see if that's a reasonable thing to consider. I could be wrong there, but that might be worth it as well. Otherwise, and continue to work on the pathway master plan as well. But we're talking about like other things, plastic bags, other stuff, but also keep aware of just our core infrastructure. Stormwater, water mains, our roads. Those core things. Because if we don't maintain those, don't invest in those, the other stuff just isn't. No one's going to really worry about that if we can't fund those key things. And I know staff is doing a good job of keeping that up, but it's also important for you guys to make sure that that's also the case.
I can add some feedback too to the whole thing. Well, not to the whole thing, but to parts of it. So, in terms of the speed limits, I think also New Brighton has enacted a new lower speed limit citywide, and I think one of the ideas about speed limits is just in terms of neighborhoods and livability, and the fact that we don't have pedestrian facilities on all of our residential streets or off of all of our residential streets. So there's a lot of, pedestrians on the streets as well as people coming to and from work in their neighborhood. And so I can understand the notion that probably, 25 or something like that is a better speed on especially neighborhood streets, which are largely city streets. I'm not sure how much authority we even have to tell the county how to do the speed limits on theirs. So I'm kind of okay deferring that. It seems like, especially with Ramsey County, as soon as they put 4 to 3 conversions and or bike lanes, the speed limits tend to drop on county roads anyway. So maybe they're starting to focus in that way, and may not need us to tell them what to do in that regard. I think as we had the discussion about that a number of years ago now, initially, the thought was that enforcement, certainly we don't want to say we don't enforce speed limits, because obviously we're in the business of enforcing speed limits, among other things. But I think the idea was that maybe it's more of an opportunity for education of people about sort of what is respectful to your neighbors, especially on these residential streets. And it would be interesting to see if there's different approaches to take with that on the education side that may be more appropriate or effective than assigning a citywide speed limit, and looking at maybe what other communities have done, because obviously there are a number that have done the speed limits and there may be others that have done other things. We do already have, and I can't remember the name of it exactly, but it's something to the effect of if a neighborhood wants to look at solving a traffic issue on their street, they can sort of band together and work with city staff. There's a committee of city staff that can sort of help through a process of looking at alternatives and approaches there, and there may be some form of assessment sometimes involved in that process, but that is something we already have as a city. I don't know if that's a process that maybe we certainly haven't done it very often. Is it the most effective approach? Are there things we could do differently with that? Maybe that's another way to address some of these concerns about speeding and pedestrian safety and some of the things that were in the survey in ways that we actually can make an impact, especially if people are willing to pay a little bit more for effective solutions. I don't know, but certainly maintaining what we've got. So that was kind of it on the streets and the speed limits. I would be interested to know more about the safe systems approach. That would be kind of interesting. I know that looking at, we looked at the sort of the takeout containers and that sort of thing as I think our first phase of going forward with some of these green to go initiatives, and perhaps the shopping bags is the next step to take and look at that. So I'd be curious to hear more about that. Organized collection. I think where the council has been in the past on it is that because there's such a sort of complete and utter tie in the community in terms of public opinion, councils haven't been sort of in a place where that was the thing that we wanted to sort of hang our hat on amongst other things that we're looking at as we're going through all the sort of prioritization of what we do as a city. So I think I'm still there. I don't want to say I'm a organized collection skeptic, but I want to understand some of the arguments in favor of it better, and sort of the data that's out there and the bigger picture of how it all fits together, because I think people have a lot of thoughts about it, and I don't know that there's necessarily sometimes as much data supporting either side of it as there is mostly emotions. So I'm an engineer and kind of a data person too, so I'd be curious to know more about that. I know past public works directors at the city also were not necessarily sure about, for instance, the savings on wear and tear and what that really translates to on city streets. And so I'd be curious to understand that maybe a little better. But we have to also be extremely careful under the statutory process that is in place, that if we take certain steps towards looking at organized collection, we're sort of all in based on what the statutes say about what we do. So I think we have to be careful in terms of looking at issues and concepts and not talk about anything that takes us like into one of those first steps that gets us into the process with both feet. So and certainly we can get the legal advice we need on that, but just a point of caution in that. I think those were the things that came to my mind primarily, so I'll stop there maybe and see if there's any thoughts from commission members or other feedback back and forth, since we try to make this a bit of a conversation.
Go ahead.
Actually, something did come to my mind as I was listening to all this feedback. The thing that comes to my mind is climate resiliency. We are seeing more events of high rain events, weather events, and system events, and just thinking about overall our infrastructure, how can we handle these things better? I think I was at a conference at EDA in Brainerd, and they were talking about permeable pavers and the savings that could result from stormwater runoff and things like that. So as we think about systems, building more resiliency to what we're seeing in the climate space. So that's just something that's been on my mind as I've been thinking about some of these things.
Well, and I think that certainly that lines up with some of the comments that we've also made about, sort of what are the new things that are out there that we can make a difference with, either from a policy point of view and or it's actually implementation by the city. So certainly I think we're all sort of interested in what those might be, and appreciate insight from the commission on that. Councilmember
And
Roth.
on that note, the watershed districts have a lot of information on that. I know we have 3 of them in Roseville, so it's kind of a lot to
It's
coordinate.
down from 4 organizations.
It is. So we've gone in the right direction. But I know the Rice Creek watershed where I'm at, they have matching fund grants so much per year for rain gardens and for permeable pavers, as you said, and other things like that. So that's a resource that we as a city should be getting out to residents so they make use of those funds and improve our resilience, as you were saying, in the environmental issues.
Along the lines of thinking of things while conversation's going on, one of the things that came to my mind too, with respect to funding for pavement management in the future, is that might be an opportunity for some joint work with perhaps some members of the Finance Commission. So something to think about, because certainly they're looking at those things all the time across all of our assets that the city has and what the funding is for those. So that, we talk about not having silos within the city, on the staff side of things, I think as well, on the commission side, if there are those opportunities for maybe a sort of a joint subcommittee or something like that, might be an opportunity to think about.
As Councilmember Groff mentioned, the funding of like rain gardens and stuff, that just brought to mind, that might be a topic of itself. Just, I know the city has a few initiatives that people could tap into for funding if they want to do things, particularly water efficiency. County has some, the state has some. That might be something that we can bring forward as part of that education piece of, hey, are you aware of all these things that are available if you're trying to do things?
Oh, very good point.
Even when they're doing permits, it's kind of good information for them to have what the options are that would be better for the environment. Because sometimes people are just doing things and they don't think about it. And if it's a small amount of an increase, they'd be willing to pay the extra just to have it better for the environment and climate change, reduce climate change. So that would be another another commission.
Right. Any other thoughts from council members or commissioners? I don't know, Chair, if you wanted to add or anyone add?
I think just on the speed limit, there's a number of aspects that I noted down from people. I think we can take this a lot of different ways, so I appreciate the input, and then I've got a ton of notes. I'm going to have to go back to the meeting too, just to refresh and make sure that we can get this in. And but this is kind of exactly where I was hoping to get, so appreciate all your input and helping us with this. Any last words from my fellow commission members?
Yeah,
I
appreciate
think
the
with that-
opportunity. Thank you for your feedback and your.
Well, we thank you, as we do with all of our commissions, for stepping forward to do the work and going to all the meetings and having those discussions. And I want to especially at this discussion note that while the council went in a different direction from your recommendation on the Leaf Center, we appreciated your discussion. We appreciated the fact that it was a difficult vote for you as well. It wasn't a cut and dried, a unanimous vote. It was a lot of back and forth and a lot of discussion, and certainly, even though maybe our decision was a little less of a close vote, I think it was informed by everything that was a part of your process. So we do appreciate that, and it still, I think that we moved in a way that was maybe not exactly what just the options were anyway. So that helped the whole process. So just a couple cents of feedback on that for you.
Awesome.
Don't hesitate to have another close vote.
That's why we're the fun commission.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Well,
We
thank
gotta
you
get
again.
a couple more tours in. as
Right,
well, so.
exactly. And, obviously we look forward to seeing you on the once-a-year basis, but if there are particular matters that it makes sense to bring, representatives of the commission or the whole commission back before us, we're happy to have those conversations.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you again.
And feel free to stick around for the other public works items that are following on the agenda.
It's a public works night out.
It's true. It's the next item.
All right. So next on our agenda We do have an item coming back before us, perhaps slightly sooner than we might have expected it to, which is, I don't think anybody is complaining about that. But it is in relation to the matter of the Leaf Center operations going forward. And we have our Public Works Director, Jesse Freihammer, back with us to talk about some options to look at specific to the choice the council made to keep the center open but make some operational changes. And so I'll turn it back over to Mr. Freihammer to bring this before the council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, we appreciate the council making the decision to go with option B. So just wanted to bring this back before council since we did hear, certainly you guys wanted to potentially change the hours, so wanted to have that discussion. But just a little bit of background, you guys did approve option B. That includes staffing the site and limiting hours, includes upgrades to security on site and replacement of equipment with the 2027 CIP. So we originally proposed doing the staffing in the study, or doing the staffing change with the option B in 2027. But we do feel we have plenty of time to implement that this year, and why deal with the problems one more year? Let's just address it right off the get-go. So staff feels, like I said, we have enough time. We can get it in the newsletter, any changes if council makes a decision at this meeting. So we can get that out in the September, October newsletter, which most people would get in early September, conveying any changes that happen. So we'd have plenty of time to do some minor security operations, like closing the walk-in gate, updating signage, moving the organics outside the gate, adding a camera, and then certainly providing some staff accommodations for the staff that would be at the site. We are recommending adding 3 to 4 seasonal workers, obviously depending upon the work plan, that affects that a little bit. And then staff would kind of just an update. We're hoping to bring an update for a request for a PO on the over 10,000 sometime in August for a new compost turner. So the big item is, what options we want to do for staff in the site. So we had kind of proposed keeping it open similar to Ramsey County hours and doing kind of a peak season only. So some options in the spring and fall. So we kind of did that as option 1, and we kind of tweaked the hours a little bit, but that cost would roughly be about $22,000. But we did kind of hear from some of the council that it may be a fall season only. Certainly, that's the use when majority of the work happens. If we're staffing the site, that's also when you get your bang for your buck with your staff. Otherwise, they might be sitting around a lot without seeing any customers come in. So option 2, staff is recommending 5 weeks in the fall only. We are recommending the hours be Tuesday through Sunday. That would be approximately 40 hours per week. And that overall cost is estimated to be about $12,000. In the packet, we did provide 2 slides. So the hours we're looking at, and I have another slide to detail it, but shorter hours Tuesday through Friday, and then longer hours 9 to 5. Some might request, why aren't we going later in the evenings? Well, we got to remember in the fall, it gets dark pretty quick. So that's why we do pretty much have to close it at 5, because most of the leaf season would be after the daylight savings flips, unless maybe that changes. So either way, we got to account for it. So the proposal for next year, if we go out under 12, we would, or under option 2 would be to operate for 5 weeks, and that would be October 23rd through November 25th for this year. More or less, we would start 5 weeks, the Wednesday, basically the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is when we'd close, and then we'd work back and we start on 5 weeks that Friday. So that's kind of how that works. So it really kind of ends up being, it's 5 full weekends. Based on last year's study, that would accommodate the vast majority of leaves. So if your leaves started dropping early, you might have to wait a week to bring them in, but it's not affecting a lot. But certainly at least we're getting kind of our bang for a buck if we're having staff at the site. So with that, staff is recommending approving option 2. That would be the fall season only, but certainly we could modify hours if council sees something different. And then approving hiring the seasonal staffing for the fall 2026 season. So with that, I can answer any questions the council may have.
Right, and just to clarify, under that option, the hours would not mimic Ramsey County. They would be additional days besides Ramsey County's days.
Correct. Ramsey
6
County's,
days a week.
Yep. Ramsey County days are closed Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we overlap them.
Yep.
We're proposing to close Monday. But residents could certainly bring it to Ramsey County on those days. Our hours are very similar. They're slightly different. Mainly on the weekends, we close it up just a tad early. And that's I think the county sites are open till 6, but we're just concerned it gets dark, we're gonna have more issues, so.
Right. Other questions from council members? Councilmember Groff.
Just to follow up with what you're saying, I think also because of the lining up on that site, we don't want people sitting on the road after dark to get in. So I think that's good. Just comments, or are we looking for that, or questions?
Questions?
I think option 2 makes sense. I like the number of hours you're open. I think the Saturday and Sunday accommodate the people who have the workday week. Obviously, most of them wouldn't be able to get in by 4 o'clock close, but they can do it on the other days. And I think this is a good recommendation.
Other thoughts, questions? Councilmember Strawn.
I know I brought this up because it came up like 2 days after our discussion last time, was that the Ramsey County sites were not going to be distributing compost because of jumping worms. And so I did reach out and talk with the person who deals with the compost, and they indicated that they have been assessing the temperature every day to make sure that the jumping worms and their eggs and whatever it is hot enough to kill them. But I don't know, should we have a backup plan if we were to have jumping worms and we needed to close? And then the other piece kind of related is, if they're not open, what is our enforcement plan for people who aren't Roseville residents if we have an opportunity that they might not have elsewhere?
So with us, the compost would be picked up outside the bins. We would not be regulating people picking up compost. Okay. Certainly, if we had a jumping worm issue, we'd work with the DNR in Ramsey County to determine what we would ultimately do, but we'd probably do something similar. But our compost is mixed a little differently than the county's, which has a lot more variety of stuff in it. Okay. We're out there continually monitoring it, so we've never seen the issue. Our temps seem to be very comfortable. So, but certainly, if we had that issue, we might have to do what Ramsey County does. But we'll continue to monitor.
Great. I just wanted to make sure it was part of our conversation too, because that could alter their long-term distribution of compost if that concern continues.
Right. Other questions, comments?
Just comment. We'd also be in favor of option 2. I think the hours work good, and I'm very much in favor of doing it this year versus waiting for next year. Fingers crossed the equipment holds out for that long.
Long enough to get the new one on order. I did have a question. Was there discussion as to even a short opening period in the spring? And is that just, like, if you did it for 2 weeks, is that too short to really hire seasonal people and that sort of thing? Is it just logistically
I think part of that, and then it is really random on when people do it. It's we would have to really guess on the weather of when we'd open it.
Right.
Because it's really when the weather's perfect for people to clean up. We see people do the walking gate, which will no longer be available, and they'll clean it really early. But then we always have to shut down when grass clipping. So I think it would be a really big guess. And then it is, of all the leaves collected at the site, it's minimal use. You have people bring in bags or 2 at a time. I'm sure there's some residents bring trailers or a whole back of a pickup truck, but it's rare. Okay. The fall is the busy time of year.
Got it. All right. No, I just wanted to check in on that. I think that the option 2 seems to make the most sense. And it does make sense also to get it started this year. So do want to provide an opportunity for public comment if there's anyone from the public that wanted to speak to this item. All right. No takers. All right. Then we would entertain a motion as to pursuing one of the options recommended.
I would move option 2.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, second by Councilmember Bauer to approve option 2. And this is for the operational part of it. There are still items related to capital that'll have to come back to the council for our consideration. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Groff.
No, I think we've said pretty much what I need to, although I am pleased that you moved ahead and got this ready for this fall. I think sometimes people get frustrated because things happen in government so slowly that they almost forget that we had talked about it or made a movement on it. And it gives you time to advertise it in the newsletter, which I thought was important. I'm glad you pointed that out. So.
All right. And as the seconder, Councilmember?
Yeah, I think we
Bauer.
covered it all.
All right. Other discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to authorize proceeding with the operational plan and option 2 for Leaf Center signify by saying aye. Aye opposed. That passes unanimously 4-0, and that is approved. All right, now we're switching gears from Public Works to a more broad view of the city. And I'll turn it over to our Finance Director, Sam Magarano, who's here for the presentation of the second quarter 2026 City Financial Report. Welcome, Mr. Magarano.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just give me 1 second to close off all of these presentations here. All right, good evening, everyone. Those who are watching as well. I'm going to be walking us through a quick presentation of the quarter financials for the city of Roseville. Before I get started, I just want to say that I don't plan to cover everything. It's a lot of information that the city can present. This evening, I'm going to highlight some of the variances from budget, and we're going to be looking at our governmental funds as well as our enterprise funds. And then we're going to be discussing some individual funds as well, and then I'm going to be talking about our investments at the very end. With that, I'm going to get us started with governmental revenues. For those who are watching and they're not familiar with the municipality finances, governmental funds are those funds that are primarily supported by tax revenues. Some of the funds included in this category are our general fund, which is the chief primary operating fund of the city, as well as our parks operation funds and our community development funds. Typically, these three funds together operate the city from a day-to-day perspective. With that, looking at tax revenues, at the end of June, the budget to actual are at 36.05%. That is because our tax revenue is collected in 3 installments. The first installment is in June, July. The second installment is in October, November, with the final settlement in January of the following year. The revenue reflecting this category represents just an advance. That advance was received in June. That's why it's below that 50% mark. In July, we have received the remainder. So quarter 3 will be reflecting a full settlement of revenues from property taxes. Okay?
From the first half properties.
Yes. Intergovernmental revenues, this category includes municipal state aid is a big component of this category. If those of you who are not familiar with municipal state aid is the aid that our Public Works Department access for maintenance and construction of roads. Also, this category includes other type of grants and reimbursements. Few to mention: the COPS grant, the BCA, the State Navigator, and the Crisis Response grants. So this revenue can fluctuate. We are at 14.68% to budget. It depends on the timing of these projects and the availability of funds and when we plan to draw some of this municipal state aid. License and permits trend as expected at 58.15% to budget. This is consistent with prior year and some of the seasonal patterns that come with licenses and permits. Charges for services also within expectations of 49.86% to budget. Again, consistent with prior year and seasonal patterns. Fine and forfeits, these are the type of revenues that come from outside, typically from the county, from county citations and remittances from those citations. They can vary, again, with timing, but we're trending at 43.12% to budget. And lastly, for governmental revenues, we have franchise fees. The city currently collects 2 types of franchise fees. We collect a cable franchise fee as well as a most recent franchise fee from Xcel Energy for gas and electrical. This franchise fee to budget, it's only at 4.27% or $116,000. It is as expected. because the cable franchise fees are actually both of these franchise fees are remitted on a quarterly basis, and quarter 2 of the franchise fees is typically remitted in quarter 3. So the amount reflects only 1 quarter of these revenues. Also, the Excel franchise fee is very minimal because that was implemented in quarter 1 of 2026. So full remittance of a quarter is expected in July, by the end of July, and will be reflected in the quarter 3 financials. In this section, I would like to highlight, especially in relations to the cable franchise fees, those are trending only 1 quarter at 24.78% to budget, approximately $74,000. The 2026 budget is $300,000. So we're trending a little bit below our expectation. I've included a quick analysis of the last 3 years of actual collections. This type of revenue is important for the city to continue to monitor, as these cable franchise fees have been decreased in the last several years, especially with the new technology of online streaming services. A lot of people are moving away from cable services. As you can see here, from 2023 to 2024, we've seen a decrease approximately 9.29%, and from 2024 to 2025, an additional 5.55% decrease. So together, it's about approximately 15% in 2 years. This is important to monitor because this type of revenues are used in our communications fund. Our communications fund relies on 2 primary sources of revenue: franchise fees and property taxes revenues. As franchise fees decrease, well, we're going to have to increase our property taxes in this fund to make up for that difference. So it's important to monitor and plan accordingly. All right, so that concludes the revenue sections of the governmental funds. Next, I have a visual. Just like I mentioned at the beginning, the primary source of revenues in the governmental funds are supported by taxes. Approximately 65% to date come from property taxes, followed by charges for services, and licensing and permits. When it comes to governmental expenditures, year to date, we're at 39.27% to budget. The leading category in this in expenditures for the city are personnel services. A good expectation for personnel services is to be at 50% by now, or trend below that. If we trend above that, then we'll have to kind of dive deep and figure out why is the case. But in this case, we're trending below that 50% mark. We're at 41.35% to budget, and I note as expected. The personnel services also include, just to point that out, we're including overtime, we're including temporary employees, we're including seasonal employees, and then also to take into account are all those vacant positions throughout the year. The overtime and temporary employees and seasonals can vary based on the use and the need of the city. And the vacant positions, sometimes we don't have control over. So it's a good thing to see the budget under, and hopefully stays that way by the end of the year. Supplies and materials, we're at 49.33% to budget. Again, this can vary based on timing of projects and the need and the schedules for this type of materials and supplies. So looking at that, if something was to be more in the upper 70s, 80s, then it'll be maybe a concern. But we're trending quite in that mid-range. Contractual services have 52.88% to budget. Again, very similar as the supplies and materials. It can vary based on timing of when the contracted services are requested or needed or entered. And lastly, with utilities, 39.79% to budget. Also can be weather driven, dependent fluctuation can occur. Again, you might have a mild winter, you might have a super hot summer, we see units can run a little bit higher. So again, 39.79%. I like to see the number under 50%, so that's a good thing. All right. Another category here, we have a few more categories left for expenses in governmental funds. We have other charges and the debt service. That's a 53.54% to budget, again, as expected. In quarter one, typically we see those principal and interest payments for our debt service. About half of that is paid. Some of the other debt service payments are going to be paid in quarters 3 and 4. So I expect this to go up more towards quarter 4. Our transfers are high, not as expected. So we do have one thing not in expectation. The first two items that make up the transfers is a $200,000 budgeted transfer from the license center to the general fund. This is a yearly transfer that's budgeted part of our budget process. This one has not yet been posted. The plan is to post it at year end in quarter 4, especially after monitoring the license center revenues, expenditures, and fund balance. Second, the $40,000 from the EDA to the Southwest Roseville Initiative that has been discussed this evening as well. That has been posted. And we do have a $219,000 EDA fund transfer that was not budgeted, but you're aware of. This was something that was not in part of the 2026 budget, but was brought to you by our Economic Development Authority as a request, I believe back in May or April.
March.
It was March, even farther back. Thank you. And lastly, capital outlay. 19.53% to budget, again, as expected, because a lot of the capital outlay infrastructure, it really depends on the projects, the entering of the contracts, the timing when the, everything has been planned. But I wanted to provide a quick update based on the type of funds. So vehicle equipment funds, as of date, we roughly spent about $1.1 million. Our building replacement fund spent about $210,000. Our pavement management plan, which shows why those intergovernmental revenues were low, only spent $353,000. Our park improvements spent roughly $35,000, and our TIF funds $683,000. The TIF funds are basically the debt service payments that are part of the pay-as-you-go the bonds that flow to those TIF funds. All right, here's a visual of governmental expenditures. As I noted earlier, primarily driven by personnel cost at 59%. I wanted to show a final slide in this category of governmental funds. This is something that I wanted to present to kind of help the council and help me and our team here at the city to monitor our reserves and how we're projecting to date based on the fund balance changes, right? So in the first column here, we see the first category is our general fund. The beginning fund balance as of 1/1/2026. Then we're taking into account all the revenues that we discussed, all the expenses, and then we're looking at how that fund balance changed. Did it go up or has it gone down? In this case, it's going down by $2.6 million to a final fund balance of $7.8 million from 10. Now, this is a certain point in time, like we're looking at June. There's a lot of moving pieces here, right? So this hasn't been introduced to create panic. Our fund balance is going down, but to use this as a tool to monitor. I expect, like I mentioned, property tax revenues weren't completely collected at the end of June, right? We have a big portion coming in July. We're going to have more revenue coming in November, December, right? So as these revenues come through, this exercise is going to be good for us to monitor that fund balance change because we really are concerned about our cash reserves. So that's why I wanted to introduce this as a slide that will be ongoing in our financial reporting to council and the analysis that I am monitoring. Besides the general fund, I'm also introducing our Parks and Recreation Fund. our communication fund, and our license center fund. As you can see, the license center fund is increasing the fund balance by that $223,000 to project at the end of June 30th, 487 fund balance, which is very good because we need that fund to help with those transfers. All right, so those were our governmental funds. Before I jump in our enterprise funds and explain what those are to our public and those who are watching, any questions about the governmental funds and what I have shared with you guys this evening?
Questions on the governmental funds?
All right.
Oh, Councilmember Bauer.
You have it broken up. I do like how you broke this out. But can you just speak to per department if you're, or per individual fund as far as if those are all within as expected? Because these are right now aggregated across like all charges for services or whatnot. But in your analysis, I would assume they're all as expected, but wanted to ask the question.
Yep. So typically my approach has been if I would see something as a whole, as an anomaly, like expected to see like 50% with personal costs, which is the primary driver to dive in. I do have a spreadsheet that I look at the department level. This is something I chose not to present in that detail because of the timing and the volume of the data. I haven't noticed anything of concern in my analysis where any of the departments are trending above their budgets to date or expectations. Typically what I'm seeing is everything is below as far as expenses, and revenues are more in line with expectation, and again with seasonal patterns, with the timing of payments and collections. So nothing to this date by quarter one and quarter two is a concern to me.
Thank you.
If anything will come up, I'll make sure I will point those things out, just like I said, pointed out as the transfers that were not as expected because of that unique situation. But definitely I will make sure I point those things out in quarter three and quarter four if they arise. I'll point out to those departments and what caused that variance to be not as expected. That makes sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yep. All right, so enterprise revenues are those type of revenues or enterprise funds that are not supported by property taxes, are supported by user charges. What that means are your water funds, your sewer fund, your stormwater fund, and your recycling fund. So those funds that the city bills for those for services. Intergovernmental revenues are at 81.30% to budget. It is as expected. If you look at the charts that were provided in the packet, last year that was a lot lower when compared to this point in time. And that is because last year the SCORE grant was collected in quarter four versus this year is being collected in quarter two. Charges for services, again, at 36.19% to budget. That seems a little low, especially if we think about this fund's main source of revenue are charges for services. And that's very consistent with how city bills and how, if you look at the chart attached in the packet, which with historical trends from last year to this year as well. It was in a 36-35% range. And that's because of timing of billing. Part of April and May accounts are billed in quarter three. The city, even though it bills quarterly, we actually process payments monthly or bill our customers monthly. And we do it in sections. And lastly, miscellaneous revenues, again, at that 255% to budget, again, not as expected. We were more conservative in 2026 when we did the budget for UB certifications, but we have certified a lot more accounts. So what that tells us, there are more residents that are not paying their bills timely.
So that's utility billing certifications to the county for collection on the property tax?
Yes.
Got it, okay.
When it comes to expenditures in the enterprise funds, again, leading with the personnel services as our largest expense, 43.2% to budget. Again, under that expectation of 50. For the same reason as we've seen in the governmental funds. Over time, temporary employee, the timing of those vacant positions, probably one of our largest department that has vacant positions that I've noticed is our police department. Supplies and materials at 53.4% to budget. As expected, again, This came very timing of projects. I did look through some of this to see if anything looked odd in any of these funds. Nothing was noted. Contractual services, again, below that 50% mark. Very similar timing of projects, needs, and schedules. Nothing alarming at this point. And then utilities at 41.42%, very similar with the governmental funds, right below that 50% mark. Again, weather-dependent fluctuations can occur.
And in these types of funds, the utilities include our payments to St. Paul for wholesale water,
Yes.
as well as to the Met Council
Yep.
for the treatment of sanitary sewer.
Yep.
Okay.
And they will be part of contractual services in this category right here.
Oh, and just on those two items, just out of curiosity, I'm trying to remember when we are billed and when we have to pay by those entities. Is it like quarterly?
It
or
is monthly.
It is monthly. So
for water, and it's monthly for sewer services to Met Council as well.
So approximately 50% would be
Yep.
sort of
So
expected.
other factors are driving
Other
that
than
cost.
usage factors.
Yep. Other factors are driving that overall bottom line being below that 50%.
So for instance, people use less water in the fall and winter as opposed to in the summer. And,
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
That's reflecting more in revenues, but as well as in expenses, because we're buying our water, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. And the last couple of points here is other charges and debt, just like in government funds, at 55%. We get principal payments for debt service in quarter one. And lastly, capital outlay related to water, very low. Again, not concerning, more I'm expecting to see a lot of fluctuations here based on timing. I looked at the specific funds and kind of looked at how much they spent to date. The water fund only spent $40,000 in capital outlay, sewer $233,000, storm sewer or stormwater $72,000, $73,000 roughly, and the Gulf fund $27,000, roughly $28,000. And again, a visual here looking personal costs as the main driver of expenditures. Any questions on the enterprise funds? A couple more slides, so hang in there with me. This is something I wanted to kind of showcase and introduce this for the first time in quarter two. I wish I thought about it in quarter one, but I've been working with our license center staff to kind of gather this type of data. I think it's important to monitor the volume of activity in the license center because it really reflects the projections on revenues, and we can predict if we're seeing slowdowns and help us plan and budget, especially with the license center being such an active source of revenue for the general fund. Here, this first slide shows the 2024 activity. As you can see, the total number of, activities or processed dealing with passport application, photos, driving licenses, renewal registrations. We had about 177 events, if you want to call it this way. If we look at 2025, which was a very active year, that went up to 203, right? And we can see that the passports were a big driver. It used to be 15,000 in 2024. It jumped to 20.6 thousand, and then 2026 to date is kind of keeping in line with that 2025 trend. We're already at 104, which is about 50% of previous year, and that's a good thing. We want to see volume, we want to see revenues coming through, and we saw that when we looked at the charges for services for license center, that we were in the fund balance. When I showed that slide, that we were building fund balance. We're not losing. We're bringing more revenues than we're spending.
Question about the
Yes.
passports.
Yep.
Looking at the data more so in your memo, it looks like most of our growth in 26 is related to dealer registrations. Do you expect that to continue to grow or to plateau?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have meetings with the license center managers and staff on a monthly basis, and I've discussed in my short time here kind of like what they're seeing happening. We have a stable source of revenue for the renewal registrations from the dealers. That is, as far as I was told and from communicating, that's not planned to be decreasing. And that's why I mentioned I'm glad to see that last year at 58,000 in that column. Now we're already 6 months at 37. To me, that even indicates it might even be higher.
Yeah.
I've had a conversation with the staff there, kind of looking at this, and that's one of the reasons I wanted this dashboard to exist, so I can monitor, you guys can monitor, so we can plan, right? If we see something kind of slowing down, well then, why is that happening, right? What has changed? Or something goes up significantly, what has changed? So we can make decisions, plan for revenue increase. That's something I've heard in my short time here. So I wanted to develop a tool that I can monitor and also be able to share with you guys, and when I have meetings with the license center staff to be able to discuss.
Do you get data from other license centers or have access to? For
I
comparison?
don't have access to, and I don't think unless we ask and reach out to them, we'll be able to get this type of data. But I can check with the managers at the license center. That was something I haven't thought about, but that's a good point. Yeah,
It's more, I'm not requesting it, it's just more.
Yeah, it'll be
curious.
interesting to add how we compare. There are very few entities. I'm learning a lot about license center. That's something is new to me as well. I don't know a ton about legislature and how the federal is involved, and I'm learning along the way with you guys. But I hear there's not a lot of cities who run a license center, passport center. There's some by the county. So the matrix or the data, we're gonna have to be creative, and maybe we have to understand how that can be comparable with us as well. So it's gonna be different. I've asked that question at some point when I met with the staff there, but I'm gonna continue exploring this. So thank you for that.
Trudgeon, I think you had a
Yeah,
bit of
just
feedback
to
too.
add on, I think it's a great credit to the license center staff that has really grown that dealership from zero to where it is now. I know they actively do try to go out there and get new dealerships on board. Sometimes it's word of mouth. We do a great job. We really make it easy. We go and pick it up at the dealership and bring it back, so they don't have to bring it back in. We also have a very large contract for the state of Minnesota. Not with the state of Minnesota, but for enterprise, for all the enterprise vehicles they purchase in the state of Minnesota. We process all of their registration, so that's really a great business here. The one factor, of course, is the fluctuation of car sales. If the economy is bad, not a lot of car sales, there's going to be less of that. But I think we continue to look for opportunities to grow that. I think it's really an exciting opportunity to continue to look to grow. How much more capacity there is, I'm not sure as far as in the metro area for us to do, but I think it will continue to take a look at that because that is a real efficient way for us. Literally, we have somebody in the back room going through those registrations really quick, and it's a great use of our resources. So something we want to continue to look at growing. But so thanks for calling that out. That's a real important component of our revenue growth.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting question. What is the TAM for something like that?
What's that mean?
Oh, total addressable market.
Got it.
Yeah. Not mama though.
Yeah.
I do think you should compliment the people who work there, though, because I have had many acquaintances, friends, and clients that come from, I'm shocked, like West Bloomington, and they come here because they say this is the one that you get through most efficiently, and it just is worth it for them to drive that far. I was very surprised in the last year how much I've heard that. So.
Yeah, this is something I've heard and I've seen it firsthand as well. When you have so little flexibility when it comes to revenue and fees that we charge, it's mostly driven by federal law, my understanding. Actually, we're working, there's finally been appointing a representative that can represent all entities that run passports and centers to the federal, I believe, or the state. And they're trying to increase those fees because we are incurring additional costs, right? But we don't have the ability to increase our revenues and fees. So staff cost, operating costs go up, right? We're budgeting more for mailing, we're budgeting more for staff, promotions, but we're not able to charge more. So we actually have to operate efficiently and bring more volume, but we cannot hire more people, right? Because we don't get more revenues necessarily. Right. So we have to be very efficient. So that's something that this dashboard hopefully will help us see how efficient and how with that volume, how we're able to keep up with the volume. And when can we plug in an extra staff So it's not going to be easy to grow, even with a new building and new capacity. We're going to have to really look at how we can grow that business, but also how is the federal government and the state, whoever is managing all the fees and the revenues, how can we bring in more? How can we adjust those fees? Because some of these fees haven't been changed, my understanding, in several years, or even more than that. So we're struggling to kind of bringing in more revenues through fees. We're actually bringing more revenues through more volume and more efficiency. Yep. And lastly, I want to touch on investments. Our investments at the end of June are approximately $69 million, 69.2. This graph here shows the type of investments. We have a large sum in the money market. That's because we received our first advance of settlement. So that's the $15 million. We have CDs, we have treasuries, agencies, and bonds and revenue bonds. And you can see the percentage in that concentration. All of this are safe securities that the city is are available to us for investments. There are not that many more options than this for us, right? So we work with brokers. I work with brokers to secure some of these investments. We have, as you will see on the next couple of slides, we have a plan when these investments can mature and when the cash kind of helps with our cash flow. The second slide kind of shows the concentration by the coupon, and the amount. So you can see between 0 to 1%, and 0 is 0.00 something. There was a time not long ago when interest rates were 0.0 something, or 1. And we can see here we still have about $1.3 million in that percentage, but then we have a large percentage in between 1 and 2%, approximately 47%. What that tells us here is that interest returns are not as people expect, right? Because we have about 50% of our investments in that 0 to 2%. So if people say, well, the rate is 4 or 5% now, why aren't we getting 4 or 5%? Well, we can't get 4 or 5% for everything that we have invested. We're getting for some of it. And here we can see when some of those low investment returns yields are maturing. So that's a good thing, right? Because we're having that 0 to 1.5% maturing in 2026. We have a big concentration in 2027 coming off our books. So we have some of those investments coming off our books finally. So that's a good thing. It's going to give us an opportunity, if the interest rate market stays strong, to reinvest at higher yields. All right. And with that, I'll take any questions. Any more questions?
Other questions from the council?
I sort of asked them as I went along.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of it. So I think we're good. We appreciate the additional detail in quarter two that we didn't have in quarter one. As you noted, quarter one doesn't have a lot yet happening, so it's a shorter report.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Schroeder missed this. You should have been so happy.
No doubt she has read the report and reread the report and
Yeah.
she's got to take. Right. I think she probably has her own personal copy of the PowerPoint and everything like that. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That then brings us to our last business item this evening, which is to consider continuing participation in the Cities for Safe and Stable Communities Coalition. I'll turn it over to City Manager Trudgeon to bring this before the council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I mentioned in the staff report, City Council is aware that we did join the Cities for Safe and Stable Communities Coalition earlier this year as part of response to Operation Metro Surge. That fortunately is behind us at this point. But there was a continuation of discussions amongst the coalition members about the possibility of continuing to work as a group. So myself and Mayor Rowe attended a meeting on June 17th where coalition members met and talked about continuing having a standing network. And the purpose of this would be able to have quick responses to any emerging issues that might pop up and support coordination on matters that affect multiple cities, fill gaps that don't currently are currently not filled by statewide organizations such as the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities, and stay fairly light footprint during normal times and scale up as needed. And they'd really want to focus on issues that affect cities, including any federal activities or enforcement, state actions taken in response to federal decisions, threats to governance and public safety, or significant operational disruptions from multiple cities. The discussion at the meeting, the mayor and I did see most cities commit to that. 24 cities committed to that. I have the list in the packet, including many of our neighbors here. City of Roseville did not commit at that meeting, wanting to have a fuller council conversation. So the question in front of you tonight is whether or not there's interest for the city to join this coalition. I would note they would have
Continue, perhaps.
to continue. Note that they would have the same advocacy lobbyist group, Momentum Advocacy, that was part of the first phase, retained at a cost of $30,000 for a year. This is at the low maintenance cost, and if we were to join, that would make it 25 members, and Roseville's share would be about $1,200. If there's significant need to scale up, there would be some additional costs and some additional conversation on the city level and what level to participate at that point. So that's the basic background. In the packet is some information, a little bit more detail, and perhaps the mayor would like to say anything about, since he attended the meeting as well, about the continuation of participation.
Yeah, I don't think I would add too much to what's here, and certainly the materials are the materials that we received, the attachment especially. It was a little bit surprising to me how many cities are able to commit to these sorts of things without talking to their city councils. It was just mayors and city managers there, and so there were, I think it was Roseville and one other city that that felt that it was important to check back with the city council, and so hopefully that you all note that we didn't just jump in and make a decision without without the council. Now, granted, I think it's within City Manager Trudgeon's $10,000 spending capability, so maybe this is overkill, but I think it was important from a policy point of view to make sure that it came back to the council, in addition to the fact that we had a lot of interest from members of the public, as was expressed even earlier this evening, in this particular coalition and its activities. And so it seemed to make sense to me to make a decision on this type of matter as a public matter with the council. So that's why we didn't just dive in and say, sure, we'll do it too. But it's really, I think, up to the council, so happy to entertain questions or discussion. Councilmember Bauer.
So the focus of this is going to be a lot more on the federal side, correct?
Yes, it's similar to what it was in its earlier incarnation. It was really not necessary. There was, I have to take it back. There was a significant lobbying effort at the legislature for certain impacts to cities, and very few of those actually received support from the legislature, but a couple of key ones did, and so cities certainly are benefiting from that. But yeah, I think that the point of this then and now is the triggering actions are actions related to federal activity, and then I think the lobbying is primarily with the state and potentially federally, as was to a certain degree the case during Metro Surge, in terms of the impacts to cities and those and what those responses impacts to cities are.
How does this group plan to be effective when both Minneapolis and St. Paul, who are mostly the target of federal actions, are not represented in this group? I'm concerned that, that while this might be an effort, I'm concerned that it won't be effective because of both the dominance of Minneapolis and St. Paul on these issues.
I think two answers to that, and I'll certainly defer to Mr. Trudgeon a little bit as well if he has thoughts, but I think, so the original coalition did not include Minneapolis and St. Paul at that time either. The thought was that Minneapolis and St. Paul have a fair amount of their own lobbying heft, being significantly larger, and that the idea is that this is a coalition of suburban communities and some even outstate communities that are much smaller individually, but together could have a voice that might be on a par with or could sort of partner with the Minneapolis and St. Paul voice, depending on the impacts. Certainly, I think a lot of the impacts that all cities felt during that time were very comparable to what Minneapolis and St. Paul might have been seeing, but certainly they have two things that we don't have, which is much more politically engaged and vocal, city leadership, and then also just the heft and resources of existing lobbying capabilities. And I have to believe and I think it was the case during the process as we had our monthly, or actually our weekly meetings during part of it, that the coalition, was definitely partnering, those lobbyists were partnering with the Minneapolis and St. Paul people to try to have a more united voice on some of these issues, if that's helpful.
Yeah, and that brings up my next one. Did you guys discuss at all if there is a disagreement or, a change in direction or a difference or a different direction that this group wants to go through than Minneapolis and St. Paul? What's the plan of resolving that?
Well, once again, this group represents our communities and our group, and so there could be differences there. I don't think that we necessarily would, not want to pursue the interests of our communities in those cases if they differ from Minneapolis and St. Paul.
I agree with that, but then how would they be effective overcoming the strong voices and attention that both Minneapolis and St. Paul have on $30,000?
Well, I think the point of view is that, this coalition represents, I can't remember what the population of these 24, 25 cities was, but it was, I think, a larger population than Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Right,
At least
but-
individually, but certainly potentially even together.
But effectively, it's a lobbying effort, right?
Right.
And so you have $30,000 to amplify
Well,
of your
and
voice.
certainly, the idea would be is that if there is the need for increased activity, that there would be an opportunity to ramp up the funding to provide more.
That
This
would
is
come back
the
to us.
$30,000 is basically to maintain sort of, it's like a retainer almost, to keep the folks engaged on behalf of this organization at a very low level for the next year, with the ability to ramp up, and then there would be additional costs associated with it at that point to handle the additional lobbying efforts. I can't remember what, I think our initial investment was similar, but it was a much shorter time window. It was like
about 1,500.
less than half of the year.
Yeah.
So similar $30,000, but it was very intense for the legislative session, essentially.
And what happens, not just with Minneapolis, St. Paul, but disagreement within, this group. Say we feel differently about something than, say, our neighbor, one of our neighbors. How is that
It's
resolved?
voluntary participation.
On any action?
Well, it's voluntary participation in the group.
Right, but so or if the group decides to do something, does that bind us to what their actions are?
I think it gives every member the opportunity to opt out of the group at that point. I don't think that it's basically it's intended to be managed through sort of a voice of the coalition. And there are these, as I said, during intense activities, there are weekly meetings of mayors, and I think at least weekly meetings of the city managers as well. There's going to be a governance entity in place to sort of advise the process during the inactive time right now. And then I'm sure they would bring things to the rest of the group and initiate those weekly meetings potentially, or periodic meetings of the mayors and city administrators to look at the questions that might be involved in whatever would be done to ramp up. Councilmember Strawn?
I just wanted to add for the public's sake, the intention, it says, is to fill gaps on statewide organizations that we already utilize, like the League of Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, CGMC, I'm guessing that's county governments. CGMC?
No, it's a coalition of greater Minnesota cities.
Oh,
Yeah.
Perfect. I was wrong. Okay, Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. So when in situations where they're not positioned to engage, which is why I would assume it's headed toward more federal activity, but it does give us some kind of coalition. I could think that maybe in times like after George Floyd is murdered, it might have been helpful to have a little bit more interconnectivity with some of the other cities to prepare on how to deal with the aftermath of that. And for sure, as we were dealing with things happening in our community with Operation Metro Surge, there was a lot of, that's why we felt it was necessary. So, I mean, I think it's not fulfilling the same thing that those other entities do, so.
One I can add to, maybe in response to the earlier question as well, that during the meeting that we had last month, there were representatives of cities who were interested in saying, well, when we got this together, why couldn't we advocate for something more city-specific? And it was, the organizers were very clear that certainly you go ahead, do that, but it's not something this group does, So I think the likelihood of those disagreements is because of the nature of the subject matter that would sort of activate the coalition. You're not necessarily going to potentially have just like we were all fairly on the same page with responding to Operation Metro Surge and what the needs and issues of the cities were, I don't know that you would see, because we've really limited the focus. And I mean, we had to sort of herd ourselves back together, even in that discussion, to make sure that we weren't going astray. That's the idea of the way it's being set up here, and that we maintain the capability for a relatively modest investment, and then we have the ability, if need be, certainly on the basis of the participants' agreement to do so, to ramp up whatever those activities might be. And you can imagine that if it requires lobbying for legislation or something like that, certainly the legislature isn't in session until next February, or January. So, certainly not a lot is going to happen between now and then anyway. Other questions or points of discussion?
Well, I just think that it's not a huge amount of money, and I think having something in place you don't want to be caught unprepared for that, which we all know how that feels. And so at least this would be a start, and we'd be ready to, act if something comes up. Hopefully it does not, but I think it is worth the investment.
Councilmember Strawn.
I'd be willing to make a motion to remain a member of the Cities for Safe and Stable Communities Coalition Phase 2.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, second by Councilmember Groff. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn.
I mean, we even heard this evening, and we heard so many times this winter and into spring, our community, as they became aware of this particular coalition, their strong support for us to be a part of this. So it isn't just a whim of ours or those involved, but when the community was aware of this, they really felt strongly about us being part of this coalition, and I think that they would support our continued affiliation.
Right. As the seconder, Councilmember Groff.
Well, and I think looking at the cities that are involved, I think we all have similar needs and responses in these cases, and that's what binds us together and helps in the decision making. And I think they would be unified in their approach. And we do have different needs than St. Paul and Minneapolis, so I don't see that as a detriment that they are not involved in this. They would be kind of like the heavy hand on the scale if they were involved with us, whereas I think these are all people that are on equal footing, and we would make a decision together, so I support it.
Right. Other discussion, Councilmember Bauer?
Yeah, I mean, I was for this when it came up originally because it was supposed to be a bit ephemeral. It was supposed to be spun up, and then the idea was that even in there, it was a date to spin it down, and I was comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with this going forward because I'm not sure where it's going to go. I'm not really comfortable being on that ride with an unclear scope. I also think its effectiveness is being overstated given the size and resources that both Minneapolis and St. Paul have, and so I don't think it's necessary. I think if there's something else that comes up just as fast as this got spun up during the ice situation, another one could be spun up as well at that time. I don't think it's necessary to be continuing to pay for something that may or may not happen in the future. If something does happen, we could come together again.
Right. And I definitely have shared a number of those concerns and wondered, I think maybe both city manager Treasurer and I were somewhat skeptical going into the meeting. And I think ultimately, from my point of view, it's relatively inexpensive ability to sort of remain engaged, but it is also only a one-year commitment at this time. And so I think if we find over the course of that time frame that it just doesn't seem to be worthwhile, I think we either have the option to opt out or the option certainly not to continue going forward after that if other communities wanted to do so. So I'm kind of willing to continue, given some uncertainty that continues to potentially be out there related to, I know, election security and things like that were mentioned during the discussions in June. So given that, I'm willing to continue at the relatively low investment, but I do want to maintain the opportunity to kind of monitor what's going on, and if it doesn't seem like it's worth continuing, I would be the first to say that we shouldn't continue it, even if it is a small amount of money. So that's my perspective at this time. We, I think, have gone through the discussion. I would just point out for members of the public, we didn't ask for public comment because there are no members of the public in the chambers right now. I know you're with us in spirit, though. We have the question before us, the motion to continue participation for another year in the Cities for Safe and Stable Communities Coalition. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed?
Nay.
That passes 3-1 with Councilmember Bauer in opposition, and that passes. That brings us to the end of our business items this evening, and we have one set of meeting minutes from our July 6th council meeting. The draft was presented to the council prior to the meeting this evening, and council members had the opportunity to provide feedback, which some of which has hopefully, or all of which, has been captured in the revised draft that has been presented to the council. Are there any further changes or corrections that need to be made to the minutes of our July 6th meeting, or a motion to approve as presented?
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Bauer to approve the minutes of the July 6th meeting as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. That brings us to our consent agenda. Mr. Trudgeon, if you could run us through those items for us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $1,170,061.61. Item 10B approves expenditures for an aerator for the Alameda Stormwater Pond, a vehicle for the police department, a replacement tandem axle plow truck, and an expenditure. I'm sorry, I had some leftovers there. I think that was it for that item. Item 10C receives a quarterly grant applications report. In 2026, the city has received $2.1 million in grants. Item 10D approves a renewal of a short-term rental license for 257 South McCarran's Boulevard. Item 10E approves entering into an encroachment agreement with a property owner of 1705 Roselawn Avenue to allow for the encroachment of a driveway in the city's drainage and utility easement. Item 10F approves entering into a professional services agreement with the low bidder Brown Intertech to prepare a construction contingency plan for the removal of fuel tanks as part of the Civic Campus Master Plan for a cost of $26,000. Item 10G approves entering into a professional services agreement with Bolton and Mink for the design and construction management services for the Brenner Lift Station in the amount of $71,800. Item 10H approves a resolution authorizing staff to request MnDOT Community Roadside Landscape Partnership Program funding for landscaping at the northeast corner of Cleveland Avenue and County Road B. Item 10I approves a fiber lease agreement with Arvig Enterprises. Item 10J approves accepting a crisis response grant from the Minnesota Office of Justice in the amount of $300,000. This grant will provide funding for one of the police department's embedded social workers during the grant period of August 1st, 2026 to June 30th, 2028. And finally, item 10K declares a vacancy in the Equity and Inclusion Commission. On August 17th, the City Council will interview interested candidates for this vacancy.
Thank you,
That is
Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Bauer. Discussion on the motion? Councilmember Strawn?
Mr. Trudgeon, can you confirm the date that you discussed for the interviewing?
August 17th.
So at the Monday meeting?
No,
That's a Tuesday or Wednesday,
I
isn't
think
it?
it's a Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a special meeting, special council
August
meeting.
17th
Yeah.
is the Monday, so it must be the 18th.
It's, I think it might be the 18th or 19th, actually.
Yeah, I think
And those
it's
are on
August
our schedule.
19th, yes, I'm sorry if I got that
It
date
is
wrong.
19th.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's what I had on my
yeah,
schedule.
yeah,
Wanted to
okay.
make sure.
Thank you for clarifying that.
All right. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed? That passes unanimously. Those items are received or approved. That then brings us to our future agenda review and other items. Mr. Trudgeon, first with the future agenda.
Yes, so we have a little bit of a break of meetings here. Our next scheduled meeting is August 10th. We will have a joint meeting with the Equity Inclusion Commission. We have right-of-way vacation for Hyde and the Hyde property, the former Pick property. My understanding, this is a pretty straightforward one. And then we have some minor agreements, State Patrol encroachment agreement for the new facility and a public improvement contracts. August 14th, I sent you an email earlier today. We need to meet as a council, at least a quorum, to canvass the primary elections. That is a Friday, looking to maybe do that around the lunch hour. It certainly can be flexible we'll be receiving the official results from the county by the end of the day on Thursday, so the meeting would have to be on a Friday. So asking if there's availability on Friday, the 14th, around the lunch hour. It'd be less than a 5-minute meeting. Let's pause there for a second.
Right? Any conflicts on the 14th?
I think I can make that.
I'm going to be out of
Okay.
the state.
All right. Unable to attend is probably all you have to say publicly.
Yeah, and I can do some additional follow-up
All right.
with everybody.
You're
I'll be
thinking
about-
noon?
Yeah, noon.
I'll be available.
All right. Sounds like we have a quorum right
Okay,
there.
excellent.
All right.
And then August 19th, thank you, Councilmember Strawn. I did have it right on this slide for the interview for candidates to fill the vacancy. And then August 24th is going to be a big. I should really edit my things a little bit closer here because I see received City Manager 2027 budget. We just had the joint meeting with the PWET Commission, so my apologies for that. And then receive a presentation from Tubman. They've been trying to get in front of you just to talk about what they've been doing this last year. As you know, we last couple of years have been supplying some dollars for their operations. And that is the consent agenda. I'm sorry, that is the future agenda.
All right.
It's too late at night.
We don't have to consent to the future agenda yet. All right. Any questions on that or feedback or other council member initiated items, announcements, communications, reports? All right. If there is nothing, the only other item on our agenda this evening is to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Bauer, seconded by Councilmember Groff to adjourn. No discussion on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously 4-0. We are adjourned at 9:52 p.m. Thank you, everyone.